These stories are first-hand accounts shared by Reddit users, detailing unsettling real-life encounters that left lasting impressions. Each narrative provides a chilling glimpse into moments of danger, survival, and eerie coincidences that might make you rethink your surroundings. Disclaimer: these accounts were originally published by Reddit users and are presented as personal experiences. While they are described as true events, their accuracy relies on the original storytellers. The details shared here are intended for awareness and cautionary purposes only. Viewer discretion is advised. Story 1. Let's not meet again, Gabriel, or Mark or Carl. This happened between 2013 and 2020. When I was 16, I played a lot of League of Legends. Like a lot, I was in Facebook groups, constantly looking for new people to play with, discussing builds. You get the idea. That's how I met Gabriel. He lived in another city nearby, but we had a mutual friend, Valerie, a girl from my neighborhood who was around my age. We started chatting on Facebook and Skype, sometimes playing LOL together. Eventually, Valerie invited me to her birthday party. Her house was just around the corner, so of course I went. Gabriel was there. We clicked instantly, but at some point during the night, he tried to get me alone in a dark room. You know for what? I said no, reminded him I had a boyfriend, and that was that. Over time, he became more invested in my life. I didn't have many friends, so he quickly became my best friend. He'd visit my city often, stay over at my house, and we talked constantly. We'd watch shows, games together, have dinner. It felt like a great friendship. Or so I thought. Looking back, the shift happened gradually. So subtle I barely noticed. But thinking about it now makes my stomach turn. It really began around 2016, right after my mom passed away. Gabriel would accidentally touch me. He started greeting me with kisses way too close to my mouth. He'd compliment me, then twist it, like, "You're so beautiful, if only you lost a bit of weight." He'd manipulate me into thinking my exes were awful, that my friends hated me. He even made bets with people about how long my partners would last before dumping me. In 2019, I finally moved out. I invited him over to help organize the place. When he was about to leave, he grabbed my face really hard and tried to kiss me. I pulled away, but he held me so tightly that I had to duck under his arm to get free. We stared at each other in silence. Then he left. He later apologized, and because he was my only friend, I forgave him a week later. I shouldn't have. Then came the pandemic. He happened to be staying at a friend's house just a few blocks from me. He asked for help dyeing his hair blue, so I went over. I met his group of friends, and they were awesome. We bonded instantly. We played board game nights, VR gaming, late-night talks. I loved hanging out with them. Gabriel didn't. He started getting upset that I was spending time with him instead of just him. One of the guys told me Gabriel had forced him to show our private messages to make sure nothing was going on between us. Gabriel suspected that his friend and I had a fling. Then came the jealousy, and something changed in his face. His eyes looked black. His behavior turned erratic. He said he had multiple personalities. One was Mark, who tried to touch me several times, and in some form, abused me. The other was Carl, some sleazy, overconfident alter ego. One night, as Mark, he told a story about meeting a girl at a bus stop in the middle of the night and having sex with her. As a woman, it sounded off. What kind of girl sleeps with a stranger at a dark bus stop? Was he lying? Bragging? Or worse, did he take advantage of someone? Things escalated. He said he was planning to get euthanized for depression. That's not legal in my country. Also WTF, when I told him that, he said a lawyer would help him. What? Then he accused me of stealing his mother's credit card. I've never even met her. Never even been to his city. One night, I had an emergency and asked if he could watch my dog. He agreed. When I came back early the next morning, the place looked clean. He said hi, "How are you?" and left. But his Facebook was open on my computer. Something told me to check. He was messaging one of our mutual friends, calling me a slut, complaining that I gave attention to everyone but him, and that the least I could do was have sex with him. I even found a picture he sent to his friend, where you can clearly see the outside of my house at night. It was sent at 4:53 a.m. I found messages to tons of women where he used my personal trauma to gain sympathy. He told everyone about my business. And then I found a conversation with a girl we both knew. He told her we were in a long-term relationship, that I cheated on him, and then I apologized to him, that we lived together, that I was toxic and manipulative. I felt sick. I reached out to her. She said she'd always found it weird that he claimed we were dating, but never posted a single photo of us. Then she told me something that made my blood run cold. One time, years prior, he used her phone and sent her own nudes to himself while she was taking a shower. She only noticed because he forgot to delete the sent message. That's when I just knew that he did that to me. I had a suspicion that he'd send some pics from my number to his, because one folder was open when I never look at my own nudes. That folder had a password. That's when I cut him off, blocked him everywhere, told all our mutual friends. I even messaged him one last time to explain exactly why I never wanted to hear from him again as a courtesy. A year later, he messaged me from a new account. It started off like an apology, but quickly turned into blame. Said I ruined his life, that I should be proud for pushing him into depression, that I lied about not being in a relationship with him, and that he loved me. I blocked him again. Haven't heard from him since. So, Gabriel, Mark, Carl, whatever you want to call yourself, let's not meet again. Story 2. There was a man who stood at the end of my driveway every night. This happened a few years ago, and I've never told anyone about it. I don't know why I'm posting it here now, but it's been on my mind again, and I just need to get it out. At the time, I lived pretty far out in the country. Just me and my dog, no close neighbors, and it was usually really quiet. I liked it that way. One night, I woke up in the middle of the night to the motion sensor light going off outside. At first, I thought it was just an animal, maybe a deer or something. But when I looked out the window, I saw a man standing at the end of my driveway. He wasn't moving, just standing there, facing my house. I don't know why, but I froze. I just stood there staring at him, and he didn't move at all. The light went off after a while, and everything went back to dark and quiet. I didn't sleep much after that. The next night, it happened again. The light came on, and there he was. Same spot, same stillness, just standing there, staring at the house. By this point, I was starting to get really freaked out. I called the sheriff's department, and they sent someone to check it out, but by the time they got there, he was already gone. The deputy told me it was probably just some drunk guy or someone passing through, and that I shouldn't worry unless he started coming closer. That didn't make me feel better, but I tried to move on. This went on for about a week. Every night, like clockwork, I'd wake up and see him standing there at the end of the driveway. It was always the same. He never moved, never said anything, just stood there staring at my house. It got to the point where I started closing the blinds at night, but I still felt like I could feel him out there. And then, just like that, it stopped. I never saw him again after that week. No explanation. No reason. It just ended. I've never told anyone this before. It's probably not a big deal, but it's something that stuck with me. I just needed to write it down. Story 3. A man with a jaw hung open in my backyard. Surprisingly, this is one of those stories I forgot about until a few days ago when I was talking to a school friend on call, and I got reminded of this. She was pretty freaked when I told her, and so did I thinking about it again. This happened when I was roughly maybe 7 or 8, so some of the details are fuzzy, but I remember it pretty vividly. This may seem like an unimportant context, but my family had just moved to America and were renting the top portion of a regular suburban house in a pretty safe cul-de-sac. I had friends that were triplets, about 3 or 4 houses down. Not far at all. Every day I'd hang out with them, and around 9 or 10 in the night, my older brother, around 11 or 12 I'd say, would make the 2-minute walk and come get me and walk me home since I was pretty young. One night, he came to get me as usual. The sun wasn't fully down, but it was getting pretty dark. We started down the walk as normal when he started casting glances over his shoulder. I didn't really notice until he shoved me hard away from the sidewalk and between 2 houses. Each house had a huge fence that separated their backyard. Not ours, though, and he made me crouch behind the fence. I remember being really scared, but more so confused since I had no damn idea what the hell was going on. More specifically, he was a pretty big prankster. Once he convinced me my older sister crashed her car into the ocean, so I didn't really believe him when he turned and said, "Walk behind the houses. I think someone's following us." Looking back now, he was probably trying to keep me calm. However, whatever calm was left in my tiny 8-year-old body was gone the moment I turned around and looked. The man had followed us behind the houses, and he was just by the edge of a few houses down near a different fence line. He had a black hoodie on, with the hood up, black sweatpants, and white sneakers. I have pretty bad eyesight now due to some health problems, but back then it was crystal clear. And I could see, with horrifying clarity, that his jaw was hung open, like he was just standing there, with his jaw hung open. It was horrifying. I think now that I'm older, maybe he had some kind of medical condition that affected his jaw. Or maybe he did crack. I don't know. But back then I could have sworn on God I was seeing some kind of demon. Anyway, my brother, when he saw me looking and getting ready to freak out, told me to just run as fast as I can to our house. We booked it. Neither of us looked back, but we were scared out of our minds. Like I said, we only rented the top portion of the house, so the bottom, with a sliding door in the backyard, belonged to some other tenant. I don't remember if she was home or not, but I remember tugging that thing open and locking it as fast as I can. And when I looked up, he was there in the yard, a little way away from the door, staring at us. Me and my brother told my sister and my mother immediately. My father was away on a work trip, but nothing came of it. Not until the day after. We went to go meet my dad at his warehouse, which had a small live-in portion above it where we lazed around until he was ready to head home with us. Around dusk, he came up and told us we might have to wait since the police were here. He walked us around to the back window of the small area to show us police all around the backyard area of the warehouses. There were a few in a line, to a white van parked on the grass by the edge of the woods. Like I said, I was pretty young, so I don't remember many details of what actually happened, but I do remember my dad, who hadn't been told about the day prior, telling us that they found a man and a woman in the van. The man, he said, had his mouth hung wide open. He seemed really disturbed telling me about the whole thing and wouldn't answer any more questions about the woman. Maybe she was dead. I've got zero ideas. I do know they were arrested on trespassing charges. I don't know anything else, and I haven't asked about it, and I doubt he'd remember. It's been over a decade, and he's pushing 70. But it freaks me out to this day. I still can't believe it happened, and I don't have any answers for it. I talked to my brother briefly about it in hopes he remembered more than I do, but all I got was a long tirade about whatever medical condition the guy probably had for his mouth to be like that. He's an annoying medical student now. Sometimes I think maybe he didn't mean any harm and was just drugged out of his mind, but this was like in the world's safest neighborhood and doesn't explain why or how he showed up at my dad's workplace. Edit. If anyone is curious, I asked around a little for more information. I wasn't able to find a lot, but I found out why my father moved away from that warehouse. The police found a dead body in a car near us. I'm not sure if this is the same van or not, or when that happened, but take that as you will. Story 4. Easter Man, stalker who's been obsessed with me since I was 15. This begins back when I was 15. I'm 18 now. Just for some background, I work in a 5-star Michelin restaurant as a waitress in a sweet little area. We usually don't get anyone with bad intentions. Usually just snobs, lol. Easter Sunday of 2022, one of the busiest days of the year, a man, who will be known as the Easter Man, came in looking for a table for one. He was in a 3-piece suit with a carton of chicken eggs. He was sat in my section, so I go over to get a drink and food order. Once I got his order, he kept me talking, asking about my education, what I was doing in school, what my plans for the future were, what my hobbies were, my name, etc., etc. Just a little too much to be polite, but I let it slide. I was busy, tired, and didn't want any trouble. Eventually, he left for the day. I thought that was that. Well, I was wrong. For the next couple of months, he would come in 2 to 3 days every week. He got more confident, attempting to flirt with me. Asked me to come out with him after work, etc. However, things got worse when one shift I was walking him to his table, and he slid his hands down my back and over my butt. I turned around and somehow politely told him to not touch me and not push my boundaries as I was only 15, and he knew that. I didn't serve him that day. A week later, he came in. I refused to serve him once again. My manger took over his table. Yet when everyone was on break and it was only me on the floor, he came inside. He knew by that point it was table service only and came up behind me, bringing his hands down my arms. I was shaken up, but politely, again, told him to not touch me. I didn't hear from him again then until next Easter 2023. Last Easter, things got worse. He showed up again, the usual shenanigans. Yet, my managers were prepped this year. not allowing me to go within the vicinity of him, keeping me safe. This was only useful inside of work. I walked through the town center to get to work. It's about a 25-minute walk from the train station. As I was walking to work one day, he saw me in his car and followed me into work. I immediately told my managers, who, yet again, told me to stay away from him. A week after that, I was having coffee before work, about a 15-minute walk away from my job, and what do you know, guess who sees me and follows me on foot to work? I, again, tell my managers who keep me away from him again. Yet that day was different. He asked my managers for me, saying he knew I was there because he'd seen me. Last year, 2024, I took a lot of holidays around Easter time and was off a lot for exams. Supposedly, he came in a few times, asked for me, and didn't come in much when I wasn't anywhere to be seen. He hasn't come in since then. However, this Sunday is Easter Sunday. So, for Easter 2025, Easter man, let's not meet. Story 5. A man was living in my basement for months. You hear stories about people unknowingly squatting in other people's homes, but never think it would actually happen to you. It happened to me. For about 10 years, I, 31F, was living alone in a 2-family house on the 2nd floor with my then toddler. For the story to make sense, I need to try and explain the layout and the backstory. My brother's close friend at the time lived on the 1st floor and is the one who referred me to the landlord. We had private front entrances, but a shared back entrance with a staircase that ran from the basement all the way to the 2nd floor. I would frequently leave my back door unlocked because I had a habit of locking my keys in the house, and my downstairs neighbor could let me in the back door. The downstairs neighbor had a friend who was kind of down and out. He had a history of substance abuse, but was supposedly clean at the time. He was a relatively nice guy, and my neighbor had been letting him stay on his couch for a while. The neighbor had a 4-year-old daughter, and having someone constantly sleeping on the couch without any plans of finding a permanent living situation was becoming disruptive to their everyday lives. Neighbor tells him he needs to go. It was summertime, so the friend decided he's going to sleep on the couch on our covered porch. We told him that's not acceptable, and when we asked him to leave, we meant the property in general. It had also become abundantly clear that he was using again, and his behavior had become somewhat erratic. He was also making a lot of unsolicited advances on me, which had become increasingly uncomfortable. He wasn't happy, but it wasn't our problem. He stopped coming around, and we no longer saw him around town. Fast forward a month or two, and I noticed things going missing. Jewelry, small amounts of money left around the house, lighters. Inconsequential items I had written off as lost. This house was old with paper-thin walls. The back door in question was right next to the bathroom, along one side of the shower. It also made a very distinct noise when opened. One day my car was at the mechanic, so it probably appeared that I wasn't home. I'm showering, and I swear I hear the back door open. I freeze, practically stop breathing, but after a few minutes when nobody murdered me American Psycho style, I wrote it off again. I'm a notorious wimp, and had a history since childhood of thinking every strange noise was a potential murderer. This was a long time ago, so I don't remember the exact length of time, possibly a few weeks. The basement was really big and shared, and the landlord also stored stuff down there. It was very packed with some very dark corners. We rarely went down there. The landlord comes by one day and goes down to the basement. He hears a strange noise, grabs a baseball bat, and finds this man in our basement. The man pushed the landlord down, ran out of the house, and down the street. We call the police, who find him hiding in a trash can around the corner. Can't make this shit up. Upon further investigation, we found the basement window had been ever so slightly propped open. In a back corner behind some boxes was a nest of blankets filled with our missing items, plus some drug paraphernalia. It reminded me of Creature's nest under the stairs at Grimmauld Place. If you know, you know. He had also left his flip phone behind in the chaos, where we found a lot of pictures of me sleeping. This man had been high on crack, living in our basement, and regularly entering my apartment both when I wasn't home and when I was sleeping for months. While he seemed like a nice guy, he was regularly high on hard drugs, and that changes people. I still get chills knowing he could have done anything to me and my child, and I would have never seen it coming. The worst part is that the charges somehow got dropped, and they never even consulted us, and they never gave us an option as the victims. This was not even close to his first criminal offense. My state is notoriously soft on nonviolent criminals, regardless of whether it was a victimless crime or not. My local police department is also notorious for making deals in exchange for information on even small-time dealers. We didn't get any justice. Luckily, this didn't have much lasting effect on my mental health, just more of a WTF, can't believe that really happened. It feels like a fever dream. Jason, let's not meet. Story 6. To the creep that lived in my aunt's house. This happened 5 years ago when I, 20F, was 15. My great-aunt's health at the time was failing, and she could no longer care for herself, so my family decided that she was better off at a nursery home. Due to her being an extreme hoarder, I don't want to shit on my family in any way, but this is important for the story. Her house sat abandoned. My father and I were the only ones that checked up on the house from time to time. It started off small when we noticed minor stuff being moved around or drawers being looked through. Around that time, we didn't think much of it, since another person close to my great-aunt also had a key to the house, and we thought maybe he wanted to get some of his stuff since he used to live with her for some time. After a while, probably a month later, things got stranger. We used to roam the house more to rescue some things in it, and just to look through everything. Maybe after a week of doing so, and feeling watched every time we were there, more stuff was moved around and placed, so we would notice it immediately, like stuffed animals that used to sit on a shelf, now neatly sitting above one other on the staircase step by step. Dirty footprints, and more drawers ripped open and the stuff inside spilled. Everywhere. We got very suspicious of the situation and investigated more. We had late-night drives passing the house just to check if we ever caught a flashlight or any sign of someone being inside the house every night. At that time, I started telling my friends about the situation, and as the stupid kids we were back then, we thought it would be a good adventure for us to just stay there for a night and play security with a mission to finally catch this person that seemed almost like a ghost to us. Another information that's important is that there was actually no way inside the house, no window open, all doors locked, and we and this other guy were the only ones with a key. Anyways, back to the day we stayed there, me and 3 of my friends just settled into the kitchen, not noticing anything out of the ordinary yet except for the normal stuff that had been going on. So we assumed that they weren't around yet. We ordered pizza and just talked for a while, just waiting for something to happen. After a while, we decided that we would go for a walk with my 2 dogs that I had with me. I made sure to definitely close and lock the door behind me. When we returned after 15 minutes, a single lamp in the last corner of the living room was turned on. Keep in mind, the whole living room was filled with trash, so they had to climb over everything to just turn this lamp on. That's when we knew the person had to be in the house now. We decided to go into the kitchen and keep a low profile just to see what would happen. After a while, one of my friends, let's call her Jane, chickened out and wanted to go home. So we let her, and just 5 minutes after Jane closed the front door behind her, we heard someone walking down the wooden stairs, obviously thinking we all left the house. We were so caught up listening to the creaking of the steps that we only realized what was actually happening when one of my dogs started barking and the footsteps immediately stopped. There was only one wall separating us from whoever just came walking down the stairs. And when we finally realized that, we all got so scared and ran out of the house as fast as possible. There was a door separating the staircase from the hallway that we luckily locked as soon as we came back from the walk. So we probably locked them up there. When we finally all sat outside the house, we just decided that it's probably best if we just call the police and let them handle the situation. As we waited, basically all holding our breaths and the aftershock of the situation, we suddenly heard someone, male voice, talking quietly, probably on the phone. That's when we noticed that a window was slightly open on the second story of the house. He must have opened it at one point, because like I said, no windows were ever open. We couldn't really make anything out that was being said. Only something along the lines of "been caught." After 30 long minutes of sitting there, the police finally arrived and went inside. They looked through everything but found nothing. He for sure had enough time to simply hide somewhere. There was a room completely filled with cardboard boxes that reached under the roof. That when things got extreme, it was like he was playing mind games with us. He left notes everywhere in the house for us to find with weird drawn on smiley faces and flowers, saying, "Catch me," placing this alarm thing underneath the front door that would go off anytime someone entered, letting him know that someone was there, trashing the bedroom, so it was beyond recognition, destroying furniture, shitting into the toilet, and placing a flower on top of the shit, and all this without ever being Caught once. Our checkups became more frequently, turning from once a day to every hour, but nothing. We eventually decided to let things cool down a little and ignore the problem for a while. At one point, he would leave in basically unlivable house, drowning in cat pee and trash. Right? Nope, wrong. Probably 4 months after we didn't put much interest into him or the house, one of my friends said that he saw some figures standing at the window behind the curtain, just staring outside, and we were just like, great, here we go again. And suddenly the interest was back. One day, we all decided to turn up at the house. There were 7 of us, and we were just ready to search that damn house from head to toe, just finding the place that guy was hiding at and leaving and entering that house. Still, everything was locked. When we first got back inside, there was leftover and rotten food in the kitchen and a surprise for us in the living room, where he shit on a cardboard box just like some fucking dog. We decided to separate. 4 of us went inside the living area. One of my friends stayed outside, and a friend, let's call him Carl, and I went into the stable area of the house because that part had a hole in the wall that connected the place the hay was kept to the attic, but we were never able to figure out where exactly that hole in the attic was. Carl was throwing little stones at the hole that seemed to be covered with something like cardboard from the other side, just so our friends would be able to hear the sound from inside to find the entrance. All of a sudden, it knocked back. We actually saw the cardboard bending from someone hitting on it, and I yelled down to my friend outside if they finally were able to find that damn entrance, and all I got back from her was, no, everyone is downstairs. Just kind of shocked Carl, and I quickly made our way out of the stable and to the others, saying if we go to the attic now, we got him, since there would be no way he could escape that quickly, and he would have had to pass us on the stairs. We all ran upstairs, but again, nothing, just nothing at all. After this, we just decided that we would give up and not go there again. We also realized that it might be too dangerous. He never seriously did anything to us except for creeping us out, but we were wondering what he would do if we seriously caught him and stood in front of him. Our parents were also not really happy with us doing any of this. So again, months passed without anything, only sometimes driving by and seeing a faint light inside until the house was finally put on the market to be sold. Today, it has been completely emptied out and is being renovated. So to the creep living in a completely rancid house for almost a year. Let's not meet. Story 7. Encounter with a vampire girl. This is the first and hopefully last time I'm writing here, so I apologize if it's difficult to read. But I just wanted to share this with you, as I think this is the right place, and at the same time get this case out of my head. Context. I'm a 26-year-old male. The incident occurred a week ago in Cologne, where I was invited by my friend and business colleague. At 8 o'clock in the evening, I was on my way home and sat down at the bus stop to wait. I was alone there, except for a girl sitting on the other side of the bus stop. It was almost empty. At first, I didn't pay any attention to her and was busy texting my friends. However, several minutes passed, and the bus still did not arrive. During this time, I put my phone aside, and that's when I began to notice some obvious oddities, to the point of feeling very uncomfortable. The girl looked to be about 30 years old, thin, dressed in a black dress and long black boots, with a hat lying next to her seat. What confused me a little was her unnaturally/unhealthily pale skin, especially on her face. It was probably just makeup or something like that, and her bags under her eyes were outlined in black. Nothing unusual. I've seen many people with informal styles and appearances, but her eyes were so empty, lifeless, glassy. However, what really scared me was the way she looked at me, with obvious aggression, predatory, like a python looking at a mouse. At the same time, she smiled weirdly and disgustingly, sometimes licking her lips and quietly humming some melody. And this went on for more than 10 minutes, nonstop. Never in my life have I felt such confusion and discomfort as I did at that moment. I just wanted to run away, but at the same time, I didn't want to look like an idiot, especially since I had waited so long. I understand how silly this sounds from the outside, but I simply cannot describe how repulsive and frightening she looked at me. Her face was so scary at that moment. I just knew that something was wrong, and my instincts and intuition were screaming that this was not normal, that this should not be happening. In addition to what I saw, I just felt in my gut that this would not lead to anything good. Eye contact was unrelenting. She was still looking at me, and I was trying to look away at my watch/phone, and so on. I felt very uncomfortable, but I tried to be friendly, greeted her, waved awkwardly, but she continued to stare silently. Then the situation began to deteriorate rapidly, and her behavior became more hostile. From passive aggression, she moved on to open aggression. She began to breathe heavily, grind her teeth, and squeak. Then my patience snapped. I stood up and shouted at her, "Please stop." I kept my distance and didn't go near her because I realized that she was probably on drugs or had mental health issues. At that moment, she seemed to fall silent and spoke for the first time, muttering, "I'm sorry." At that moment, I felt a little calmer, and she even stopped staring at me. I texted my friends that I was still out and would be a bit late getting home, and just then my heart skipped a beat. She let out a loud cry, like a scream. The girl jumped up from her seat and started coming toward me, muttering some weird stuff in German. I was confused and gradually, step by step, prepared to retreat until the girl suddenly started chasing me and rushing towards me. This crazy clung to me with her long, sharp nails, drawing blood, and tried to bite me several times, tearing my shirt at the shoulders. I had no choice but to hit her between the ears, as it was a matter of my safety, health, and possibly even my life. After that, I pushed her aside and in a few minutes managed to run to a small shop where there were some people. I briefly told them what had happened to me, and they told me to call 110, which I did. My scratches on my arm were successfully treated by a local worker, for which I am very grateful to him. Later, I went to the police station and showed them my injuries/scars on my arm. I told them about the incident, and they suggested that I file a report in order to bring the attacker to justice. However, I refused to do so because I was due to return to my homeland in 3 days and simply did not have time for all the red tape. I still don't know who this lunatic was or what motivated her, but here's my banal lesson. Never underestimate the number of crazy people around you, especially when it comes to big cities and if you are alone. I'm a grown man and was able to stand up for myself, but imagine if a child or an elderly person had found themselves in the same situation. I'm afraid to imagine what would have happened next. This is not the worst or scariest thing that could happen in life, but it was so damn crazy and frighteningly absurd. Story 8. The Ballerina. This happened last week. I live alone in a small college town, although I'm not a student or faculty member. My apartment is in a duplex on a residential street, just a few blocks from campus which most of the students have left for their winter break. Things get very quiet when they're not around. Late Wednesday night, I woke up to a disturbing sound outside. It was someone crying, but not in a normal way. This was more like delirious wailing. The person didn't sound grief-stricken or panicked, and there were no cries for help. Otherwise, I'd probably have gone outside cautiously to check things out. This sounded more like someone doing an impression of a ghost, but being a little too convincing. A sort of woo-ah, over and over. Not a pleasant way to wake up. I got up and looked out the window, but didn't see anyone. I couldn't tell where the sound was coming from. After a few minutes, the wailing grew distant, and things got quiet again. I went back to sleep, a little unsettled. Thursday night rolled around, and I went to bed as usual, wondering if I'd hear anything again. Sure enough, I was awakened a few hours later. But this time the sound was completely different. At first, I wondered if there had been a heavy snowfall, because I heard what sounded like the edge of a shovel scraping the sidewalk. It was very rhythmic. 2 plodding footsteps followed by a long and drawn-out scraping. Thud, thud, scrape, thud, thud, scrape. I got up and looked out the window, where I saw no snow but a dense fog and a woman across the street. It took me a minute to tell if she was wearing some strange hat, but then I realized that the hat was her hair. It was long down to her waist and completely filthy and matted, bunched up into a single mass that looked like a gigantic, glistening hairball. The woman was standing with her shoulders hunched forward and her arms crossed behind her back, like a figure skater or dancer. She was doing an unusual sort of dance, where she would take 2 heavy stomps and then glide as if she were on ice skates. But there was no ice. I couldn't tell how she was gliding so gracefully and effortlessly across the pavement. It was almost hypnotic to watch, because she appeared to be elderly and frail. But she could spin, glide, and maintain balance on a level that would be hard for me to keep up with. Each time she would glide, I'd hear the scrape sound of her shoe against the pavement. There were no additional steps to the dance. Just the rhythmic stomp, stomp, glide headed in one direction before twirling around and doing the same steps in the other. After a few minutes, she stopped and then stooped down like a runner at the starting line, dramatically leaned forward with her fingertips lightly touching the ground. She stayed that way for a good minute or two. It was a very unsettling thing to see in the shadows and fog. Then she slowly stood up, turned facing away from me, and got up on her very tiptoes with her long, skinny arms outstretched. Then she broke into that rapid, tiptoeing motion that professional ballerinas do. In my mind, I heard that classic cartoon sound effect that plays when a character scampers away. Without a sound, she danced into the fog. I haven't seen or heard anything from her since. Story 9. My neighbors say they've known my son for years. I've never had children. How old must he be now? 8? 9? I stared at my neighbor, unsure what she was asking. She read the confusion on my face. Your cute little guy. I saw him biking down the lane earlier. He must be old enough for grade 4 now, right? Mrs. Babbage was a bit on the older side, but I never thought she had shown signs of dementia. Not until now. I wasn't exactly sure what to say. She proceeded to stare at me, tilting her head as if I was the one misremembering. I awkwardly opened my mouth. Around my little guy. She brightened. Yes, he must be in grade 4, right? Sure. I mean, yes. He is. What a cute little guy, she said, and returned to watering her flowers. It was an odd, slightly sad moment. I wondered if her husband had seen glimmers of this too. I could only hope that this was a momentary blip and not the sign of anything Alzheimer's related. I took the rest of my groceries out of my car and entered home. I had a long day of teaching, and I just wanted to sit back, unwind, and watch something light on TV. But as soon as I took off my first shoe, I smelled it. Something burning on the stove. Something burning with lots of cheese on it. The hell? I dashed over to the kitchen and almost fell down, partially because I was wearing only one shoe, but also because there was a scrawny little boy frying Kraft dinner. I let out a half scream. But very quickly, I composed myself into the same assertive adult who taught at a university. What? Excuse me. Who are you? What are you doing here? The boy's blonde, willow-like hair whipped around his face as he looked at me with equal surprise. Papa, what do you mean? I'm here. I'm here. He was a scared, confused child, and I couldn't quite place the bizarre inflection of his words. Do you want some KD, Papa? Have some. Have some. Was there a Russian accent? It took me a second to realize he was wearing an oversized shirt that looked just like mine. Was he wearing my clothes? I held out my palms like I would at a lecture, my standard everyone settle down gesture, and cleared my throat. I'm sorry. I don't know who you are, or what this is. The boy widened his eyes, still frightened by my intensity. He stirred the food with a wooden spoon. It's KD, Papa. Your favorite. Chili cheese kind. Don't you remember? His name was Dmitri, and he claimed to be my son. Apparently, at some point, there had been a mother, but he didn't remember much about her. He only remembered me. You've been Papa my whole life. My whole life, Papa. I tried having a sit-down conversation. In fact, I tried to have many sit-down conversations where I explained to Dmitri that would be impossible. But it always ended with him clutching me with impassioned tears, begging me to remember him. The confusion only got worse when my mother called. How is my grandson doing? She asked. I didn't know how to reply. The conversation grew awkward and tense until eventually I clarified my whole predicament. Mom, what are you talking about? I don't have a son. I've never had a son. My mother gasped a little, then laughed and scolded me, saying I shouldn't joke around like that. Because of course I've always had a son. A smart little guy who will be celebrating 9 this weekend. I hung up. I stood petrified in my own kitchen, staring at this strange, expectant Slavic child. For the next 10 minutes, all I could do was ask where his parents were, and he just continued to act frightened, like any authentic kid might, and replied with the same question, How did you forget me, Papa? My method wasn't getting me anywhere, so I decided to play along. I cleared my head with a shot of espresso. I told him my brain must have been scrambled from overworking, and I apologized for not remembering I was his father. He brightened immediately. It's okay, Papa. It's okay. He gave me a hug. You always work so hard. The tension dropped further as Dmitri finished making the noodles and served himself some. I politely declined and watched him eat. and he watched me watch him eat. So you're okay now? You're not angry? His accent was so odd. No, I said. I'm not angry. I was just a little scrambled. His eyes shimmered, looking more expectant. So we could be normal now? A wan chill trickled down my neck. I didn't really know what to say, but for whatever reason, I did not want to say yes, we can be normal now, because this was not normal. Far from it. This child was not my son. He started playing with his food and quivered a little, like a worried mouse seeking reassurance. Everything will be fine, I eventually said. No need to stress. Enjoy your noodles. To my shock and dismay, I discovered that Dmitri also had his own room. My home office had somehow been replaced by a barren, clay-walled chamber filled with linen curtains, old wooden toys, and a simple bed. The smell of bread and earth wafted throughout. I watched him play with his blocks and spinning tops for about half an hour before he started to yawn and say he wanted to go to sleep. It was the strangest thing, tucking him in. He didn't want to switch to pajamas or anything. He just sort of hopped into his straw bed and asked me to hold his hand. Dimitri's fingers were cold, slightly clammy little things. It was very bizarre, comforting him like my own son, but it appeared to work. He softened and lay still. He didn't ask for any lullaby or bedtime story. He just wanted to hold my hand for a minute. Thank you, Papa. I'm so glad you're here. So glad you can be my Papa. Good night. I inched my way out of the room and watched him through the crack of his door. At about 9:30, he gave small, childlike snores. He had fallen asleep. Cautiously, I called Pat, my coworker with whom I shared close contact. She had the same reaction as my mother. Harlan, of course you have a son. From your marriage to Svetlana. My marriage to who? You met her in Moscow, when you were touring Europe. It was true that I had guest lectured 15 years ago across the UK, Germany, and Russia. I was awarded a grant for it. But I only stayed in Moscow for 3 days. I never met anyone named Svetlana. Don't be weird, Harlan, come on. Pat's conviction was very disturbing. You and Svetlana were together for many years. We were? How many? Look, I know the divorce was hard, but you shouldn't pretend your ex-wife doesn't exist. I'm not pretending. I'm being serious. I don't remember her. Then get some sleep. I sipped on my second espresso of the night. But I have slept. I'm fine. Well, then I don't get what this joke is. Knock it off. It's creepy. I'm not joking. I'll see you tomorrow for your birthday. Birthday? Yes. Your son's birthday. Jesus Christ. Good night, Harlan. Get some sleep. I didn't sleep that night. My efforts were spent scouring the filing cabinets and drawers throughout my house. I had credit card bills covering school supplies, kids' clothing shops, and costlier groceries. I even had pictures of Dmitri hung around the walls from various ages. It's like everything was conforming to this new reality. The harder I looked for clues to disprove my fatherhood, the more evidence I found confirming it. It was Dmitri who woke me up off the living room couch and said Uncle Boris was here. Uncle Boris? I peeked through the window and could see a very large blond man smiling back at me. Behind him was a gaggle of other relatives, all speaking Russian to each other. Hello, Harlan. The blond man's voice penetrated past the glass. We are here for Thursday. They all looked excited and motioned to the front door. They were all wearing tunics and leggings. Traditional birthday clothes or something. I was completely floored. I didn't know what to do. So I just sort of nodded and subtly slinked back into my kitchen. Dmitri came to pull on my arm. Come on, Papa. We have to let them in. I don't know any of them. Yes, you do, Papa. It's Uncle Boris. It's Uncle Boris. I yanked my hand away. It was one thing to pretend I was this kid's dad for a night. It was quite another to let a group of strangers into my house first thing in the morning. Dmitri frowned. I'll open the door. Wait. Hold on. I grabbed Dmitri's shoulder. He turned away. Let go. I tried to pull him back, but then he dragged me into the living room again. Our struggle was on display for everyone outside. Boris looked at me with saucer eyes. Dmitri pulled harder, and I had no choice but to pull harder back. The boy hit his head on a table as he fell. Boris yelled something in Russian. Someone else hollered back. I heard hands try to wrench open my door. Dmitri, stop. I said, let's just take a minute to. You're hurting me, Papa? What? My front door unlocked. Footsteps barreled inside. I let go of my son and watched 3 large Slavic men enter my house with stern expressions. Dmitri hid behind them. "Is everything okay?" Boris peered down at me through his tangle of blonde hair. "Yes. Sorry," I said, struggling to find words. "I'm just very confused." "Confused? Why were you hitting Dmitri?" The little boy pulled on his uncle's arm and whispered something into his ear. Boris's expression furrowed, but before I could speak further, a slender pair of arms pushed aside all the male figures and revealed a woman with unwavering, bloodshot eyes. Something in me knew it was her. Svetlana. She wore a draped brown sheet as a dress, with skin so pale I could practically see her sinews and bones. It's like she had some extreme form of albinism. "Harlan," she said, somehow breaking my name into 3 syllables. "Harlan." I've never been so instinctively afraid of a person in my life. It's like she had weaved herself out of the darkest edges of memory. I saw flashes of her holding my waist in Moscow, outside Red Square. Flashes of her lips whispering chants in the shadows of St. Basil's Cathedral. Svetlana held Dmitri's shoulder, then looked up at me. "Just tell him we'll be normal. Tell him everything will be normal." "No, this is not happening. None of this is real." Barefoot, and still wearing the same clothes as yesterday, I bolted out the back of my house and hurtled towards my driveway. Before the rest of my new family could realize what was going on, I hopped into my Subaru and stepped on the gas. As I drove away from my house, I looked back in my rear-view mirror, and I swear it didn't look like my house at all. I swear it looked like a thatched roof hut. Back at the university, I walled myself up in my study. I canceled all speaking arrangements for the next week, saying I needed a few personal days. No one in my department knew I had a son. Nothing in my study indicated I had an extended Russian family. When I asked Pat about our phone conversation last night, her response was, "What conversation?" My mom said the same thing. With immense trepidation, I returned to my house the following day, and after setting foot back inside, I knew that everything had reverted back to the way it was before. No more framed pictures of Dmitri. No more alarming photo albums. In that clay-walled room where Dmitri spun tops and slept inside, it was just my home office again. To this day, I still have no clue what happened during that bizarre September weekend. But doing some of my own research, I'm starting to think I did encounter something in Moscow all those years ago. Some kind of lingering old curse, or a stray spirit, or a Chernaya Vedma, a black witch disguised as an ordinary woman. Although I haven't seen any evil things bubble up around my place since, every now and then I do have a conversation with Mrs. Babbage, and she seems to remember my son very well. Such a cute little guy, always waving hello. Did you know he offered me food once? I think it was Kraft dinner. Story 10. I hit something with my car driving down a rural highway late at night. I can't tell what I hit, and I'm terrified to find out. This happened a week ago, and I still can't believe it at all. If anyone here knows anything about what happened to me, please let others know. Let me start from the beginning. I had hit the road while it was still light out with a random assortment of clothes and toiletries thrown into the backseat of my car. I just had to escape, you know? My boyfriend started drinking again, and when he gets drunk, he gets angry and starts putting holes in the drywall. I didn't want to be one of those women who stay even when things get that bad and end up dead, so when he left to get more alcohol from the liquor store around the corner, I grabbed what I could and ran. We were living in Sedona, Arizona, far from my nearest family in Oklahoma City. I didn't have much money to spare, but I figured I would have just enough of the gas to get me there. At around 6 p.m., I started the long drive home. The first few hours were uneventful. Once I got out of the city, it was miles and miles of dry desert road. I was blasting the AC and listening to the radio to keep sane. The very first thing I did when I left was turn my phone off to avoid even seeing the inevitable onslaught of calls and texts from my ex demanding I come home. I tossed it in the back seat and tried to not think about the one tether I still had to him. The sunlight slowly dwindled away until all I was left with were my headlights and a sky full of stars. I didn't want to turn my brights on to blind any drivers coming the other way, even though the new moon wasn't providing any light, which is probably why I didn't see the whatever it was before I ran right into it. I had a split second to notice something had run into my path before I felt a sickening thud against the hood of my car. I screamed and hit the brakes, throwing everything in my back seat onto the floor. It got sent flying and rolled to a stop several yards away, just out of the range of my headlights. I could vaguely make out a lumpy shape, like a person wearing a big robe or blanket or something. The only thing I could hear for the first few seconds was the sound of my own heavy breathing. Fuck was the only thing I could think. I just killed somebody, I thought, and then immediately tried to rationalize a way out of that thought. It's probably a coyote. No, too big. A mountain lion then. Still bad, but it made more sense and gave me more peace than the idea that I hit a lone hitchhiker out in the middle of nowhere. All these thoughts occurred in the span of a few seconds before I realized I could turn my brights on to get a better look at it. I braced myself before flicking them on, and the white light briefly blurred my vision before my eyes settled on the figure I had hit. It was big and splayed out on the asphalt, its body contorted and broken. I could make out leaking blood coming from somewhere, pooling on the road ahead of me. And guts. The force of the impact, or the skidding across the road, must have torn open its stomach. What was, I still couldn't say. Its head was hidden behind its large form, at least half the size of my sedan, and I could make out what looked like black fur covering most of its body, and a tail that snaked out beyond a light from my headlights. It was also long-limbed, and the one appendage I could make out with any clarity ended in a skinny paw tipped with long, jagged claws. My realization that it was not a human being I had just killed wasn't as relieving as it should have been. The fact that I couldn't make out what the hell this thing was freaked me out almost more than the impact had, and I nearly lost my lunch right then. The blinking warning signs on my dashboard tore my eyes away from its splayed guts and back to the reality that my car was probably just as fucked as the creature. My foot was still mashing the brakes into the floor, so I put the car in a park and eased off, removing my shaking hands from the wheel as well. I also dimly realized that I was bleeding from smashing my nose against the wheel, but the hurt was a dull ache thanks to the rush of adrenaline and anxiety. I had little hope that my phone would have any cell service out here, but I figured I should try. If it failed, I'd have to drive my car off the road and across the cracked desert ground to get past its body, since it was blocking most of the two-lane road. Something in me didn't want to take my eyes off of the thing, but my phone had surely fallen onto the floor during the crash. I tried blindly pawing at it to no avail, so I unbuckled my seatbelt and turned to sift through my junk to find it. I felt a slight lurch in the car as my hand made contact with the phone and whipped my head back around to see that the thing was closer, by at least a few yards, now well within the range of my regular headlights. Still in the same mangled position, though now I could see it more clearly. What I thought was fur was just mottled gray-black skin, and what I thought was a tail was actually one of its arms. Legs? It was too bent and mangled to tell. My car lurched again, and I slammed on the brakes, but couldn't figure out how I moved that close without noticing. I wasn't looking away long enough for the movement to be gradual enough not to notice. Oh God, was it alive? Had it moved, somehow crawling forward while remaining in the same broken pose? My hands shook even more as I attempted to dial 911 3 times, not daring to take my eyes off of the thing. To my surprise and relief, the line actually started ringing, and an operator picked up soon after. 911, what's your emergency? A man's crackling voice rang out. I'm out on the road like an hour or two from the last gas station, and I can't remember the last town I passed, but I just hit a big animal that's blocking the road ahead, and I'm not sure if my car will be able to go off-road to pass it. Ma'am, are you injured, or is your car smoking? I'm bleeding from my nose hitting the wheel, but it's fine, I said, not wanting my injury to slow down a response. I figured paramedics would take longer to get here. My car isn't smoking, but the check engine light is on, and I think there's a problem with the brakes. I thought of the car lurching closer to the creature. I didn't even notice how close I got. Okay, ma'am, we're getting your location on GPS and sending an officer out to help you dash. The line went static for a brief, terrifying moment, but returned quickly and, thankfully, became clearer. And can you tell me what animal you hit? And can you confirm that it's dead? Unfortunately, the questions shook me out of my relief because I couldn't confidently answer either one. I think it's a bear, but it has a tail, I think, and its limbs are too long. And I could see its guts, so I'm pretty sure it's dead, yeah. Regardless, I answered with my best guess, knowing I could be wrong about both. Are you able to step outside of your vehicle and make sure? The man said. W at what? Why? I asked, thoroughly confused. Why would he ask me to do that? And why was I so resistant to the idea? It was a dead animal. I'd seen and hit my share of roadkill before. This was definitely the biggest, though, and I couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't all that dead yet. I'd rather stay in my car, if that's all right. It would just help the responding officer understand the situation better and how best to help you. Was he being weirdly insistent or was I being obtuse? I couldn't tell. Okay, just give me a minute. In a daze, I put my hand on the car handle and began to slowly open it. That's when I heard something underneath my car. A quiet, slow, scratching sound, like something weakly pawing at the undercarriage. I froze with my hand on the handle just before I was about to unlock the door. Stretching out from the darkness was a long, skinny appendage coming from the same side of the road that the creature's long leg went into. With my face pressed to the window, I could make out enough of the limb to know that it must have ended right underneath my car. It pulled me closer. The thought became unshakable. No other more reasonable explanation fit in my head. It pulled me closer while I wasn't looking. Is everything all right? Were you able to step outside your vehicle to check on the creature? No. I think it's best if I stay inside my car. It's dark out there. I found myself unwilling to tell the truth about what I saw for fear that he wouldn't believe me. I could hardly believe what I was seeing, and I was the one that hit the damn thing. Are you sure? There will be a delay in response time if you cannot tell us the nature of the creature. I will ask you once again to step outside of your vehicle. He was definitely insistent that time, but there was no way in hell I was leaving this car. I triple-checked that the door was locked and said, I am worried that the animal is still alive and might react if I open the door and step outside. Terse, but I figured I'd save him the time in trying to convince me. The thought of waiting here with this thing any longer than I had was terrifying, but was better than doing what the voice on the phone was telling me to. Okay, see you soon. Click. The abrupt end of the call startled me, and the following silence was deafening. I kicked myself for not mentioning the limb, but every call I tried after that failed to go through. I turned my key halfway to turn the engine off, but kept the lights on. I figured I'd still need the car to be able to move after this ordeal was over, and probably couldn't expect a tow truck at this time of night. I barely blinked for the next hour, staring at the creature before me, watching its blood continue to leak out and its guts sag in the cool desert air. They looked weird. I guess I'd never seen a living thing's insides before this close, but they were so brightly colored and my headlights were reflecting off of something shiny in the middle of the viscera. I kept one eye on the limb that was underneath my car. It never moved an inch, but the soft, nearly inaudible scratching filled my ears during the wait in the deafening silence. Now that my engine was off, it was painfully audible. I glanced at my phone a few times to check the time. 3:45 a.m., 4 a.m., 4:30 a.m., until finally I saw lights in my rearview mirror. I scrambled to turn the lights on in my car so he could see me inside. And as the car came to a stop a few yards behind mine, I held up my hands in a wait gesture and pointed to the ground beside my door as best I could, hoping he would see it clearly in the light of his headlights. However, when I looked at it myself, the limb was gone. The officer either didn't interpret my hand signs or didn't care. He stepped out of his car and began to walk across the road to me. I noticed that he turned his car off, but left the lights on and his hazards up, and it struck me that no other cars had driven down this road the entire time I've sat here, waiting. A blessing in disguise, I thought to myself that no one else had to deal with what happened next. When he was halfway between his car and mine, the limb snaked out from the darkness and a clawed hand latched onto his leg. And even through my closed doors, I heard a sickening crack as his bones shattered under its grip. He barely had time to scream in pain before the hand whipped him into the darkness. The shock and horror froze me for a few seconds as I desperately tried to search the darkness for any sign of him before realizing I hadn't looked at the creature in too long. I tore my eyes from the darkness and looked ahead of me. It was standing now, its gut still hanging from its torn open stomach. The thing was at least 3 times the height of my car, covered in its own blood and viscera. Its face was out of view, far over the height of my lights and the roof of my car, and now I could see that it wasn't big like a bear, but instead coiled around on itself, like a human stretched out with its arms and legs and torso all at different lengths. Its arm was what had snatched the officer away, and I heard a loud squelch as it began to almost reel it into its body. The officer came back into view quickly as the monster raised him up by his crushed leg. The officer was screaming in pain, and all I could do was watch in horror as he was raised 10 feet off the ground and towards this thing's face. Somehow, the officer still had some of his bearings, because he had managed to unholster his gun. He unloaded into the monster's chest, the shots ringing out across the barren desert. In response, the thing threw the officer against the ground hard and let out an unholy screech, louder than the gunfire, louder than anything I've ever heard. It was almost like an inhale, sucking in all other sound until the only thing reverberating off of the distant mountains was a dull, inverted roar that crackled at the edges like static. No, that was my radio, crackling to life somehow and reverberating this thing's scream. The whole thing transpired in under a minute, and I don't think I stopped screaming until just then, when I saw the cop's body flung like a rag doll onto the side of the road, a lane away from my car. His leg was definitely broken, and he might have been knocked unconscious by the throw. I only spared him a glance, but when I looked back at the monster, it was turning away and retreating from the light of my brights, long limbs clutching its bleeding chest and holding its hanging guts. Seconds that felt like hours passed as I sat there paralyzed, staring at the darkness and willing this nightmare to be over. I hoped to God that it was gone, bleeding and dying and deciding I wasn't worth the trouble. That thought reminded me of the man who I hadn't even looked at yet, who might still be alive. He was still crumpled against the asphalt, face down, arm bent at a weird angle, leg absolutely mangled. I couldn't just leave him there, but stepping outside meant risking that thing coming back for me. I decided to crack my window and try to get the officer's attention. "Officer," I yelled, "are you okay? Are you still alive?" A brief moment passed with no response, and then I heard a labored grunt and saw him move. I felt awash with a mixture of relief that he was alive and a feeling that if he wasn't, I could have justified starting my car and leaving him there. Not a feeling I'm proud of, but I shook it quickly and said, "Can you get inside?" That thing, I think it's gone." Another grunt, and then I heard his voice barely above a whisper say, Don't leave your car. I think I can fuck. My leg's fucked. Just unlock your car. I'll crawl as fast as I can inside, and then we have to go." Okay. I'll unlock it when you get close." I was still unwilling to take any risks. The officer rose to one hand and one knee, the other leg dragging behind him and the other arm hanging limply. Slowly, painfully, he made his way across the road to me. While he did that, I turned my key over and over, the engine spluttering and dying each time while I kept my head on a swivel, watching everywhere for the monster to come back. When he was only a few feet away, I saw something at the edge of the light cast by the cop car. The hand was back, and it wasn't moving. He was near my car door, and it was there waiting. That's the only explanation. It could see us right now, and it was waiting for me to open my door to him. My car wouldn't start anyway. We would both be dead in the water if I let him in. But his car still worked. There's no way he could make it back there, not with how long it took him to even crawl across the road to mine. With my window still cracked, I whispered, "Do you still have your car keys?" "Mine isn't starting." "Yeah, they're still in my pocket, but I don't know if I can get over there. Just let me in before that thing comes back." I looked back at the clawed hand, tense and ready to pounce. I looked at the overwhelming darkness just beyond my brights, knowing that it was there, watching. "Officer, it's already back. Behind you, its arm is there. I think it's waiting for me to open the door for you." I couldn't lie to him, but maybe he'd understand. "I need you to get your car keys out and toss them to me. I can make a break for it and drive back to town and get help. It isn't attacking you. Maybe it's afraid of the gun. Please, I need to get out of here." My pleas came out in a desperate tumble. Looking back, I was practically begging him for permission to leave him here to die. He stopped crawling. Wordlessly, he slowly reached into his pocket and pulled out the car keys. Then he reloaded his gun, painfully slow with only one good hand, and positioned his flashlight on the ground facing towards the hand. "I'm going to toss these on the ground in front of your door," he said. Then, I'm going to turn around and fire at it. That'll give you a chance to get in my car and drive away in whichever direction is safest. He spoke like a man digging his own grave. Thank you, God, thank you. I'll call for help as soon as I'm clear. It felt like I was the one killing him, even as I thanked him. On three. 1, 2, 3, he shouted, and everything happened at once. He tossed the keys, turned the flashlight on, and turned to fire 2 shots at the hand. The first one struck the asphalt, but the second one found its target. 2 of its fingers were blown off, and it recoiled back in pain as I heard its rumbling screech begin to sound once more. Despite the volume, I could tell it was close. I didn't have a choice, though. I leaped out of my car and snatched the keys and made a break for the cop car only a few yards behind me. The monster's scream was suddenly joined by the officers, and 3 more shots rang out by the time I reached the car. I opened the door and jammed the keys into the ignition and chanced one last look at what was happening ahead. The monster's other hand had speared through the officer's chest and was smashing him into the ground over and over, reducing his body to a wet pulp. In the headlights, I caught the briefest glimpse of its face for the first time. God, it looked like someone had carved a dozen holes into black rubber and jammed eyes and teeth in at random. Part of it was scraped off, probably from the impact, and I could see more blood and muscle giving way to whatever was underneath. It didn't seem like bone. It was so reflective in the light that it nearly caught me off guard. It was looking at me, tilting its head like I was something curious. It raised its injured hand and held it up to me, and I could see the bleeding stumps where 2 of its clawed fingers once had something stringy that I now believe were wires coming out of them. The monster waved at me, and its hand shot out like a cannon, cracking the windshield with the impact. I threw the car into reverse and slammed on the gas, outspeeding it before the claw could get a grip on anything substantial. It tossed the officer aside like a rag and looked at me as I sped away backwards. Mercifully, it did not follow, and the light reflecting off its exposed skull was the last thing I could see in the distance before I turned the car around and continued as fast as I could towards town. With trembling hands, I dialed 911 once more. The officer was dead, no doubt about that, but I thought maybe they could block the road off, warn people or something. The call went through right away, didn't even ring. Crystal clear, the same voice from earlier rang out. 911, what's your emergency? I called a while ago, and you sent an officer out about me hitting an animal with my car. I didn't even know what to say. Would he believe me if I told the whole truth? I continued, the officer you sent, he got injured by the animal, and he told me to drive back without him, in his car. Fuck, even I didn't believe myself. Did you get away? How far away are you from the animal? If the officer is injured, you need to go back for him and get out of your car, said the voice. No, what? I said, thoroughly confused. I'm not going back there. It's dangerous. Then his blood is on your hands. Stop your car and step out of your vehicle so we can place you under arrest. My blood ran cold. Why would he say that? What good would that do? I had begun to realize that something was not right about the times I called for help. Why would you say that? Why do you want me to get out of my car? My voice was hard, and I kept my grip steady on the wheel and pressed on the gas even harder. You need to get out of your car, he said, his voice growing both more insistent and more robotic. Get out of your car. 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 Get out of dash. I hung up and threw my phone into the back seat once more. I didn't have a moment's peace before the cop car's mobile radio turned on and kept repeating the same words. I tried to turn it off, but only found the transponder. This wasn't the police. It couldn't have been. I thought back to its screech causing my own radio to freak out, the metallic sheen of its insides, the wires. I clicked the transponder on and said, I'm not getting out for you. I know it's you, not the cops. Get out of the radio and leave me the fuck alone. My voice was trembling, but it got the voice to pause its repetitions. For a moment, static silence filled the car. See you on your way back, then. Click. The lights went off on the radio, and all the communication devices stayed off for the rest of my drive back to town. The sun began to rise, but I didn't risk stopping until all darkness was gone from the desert. I ditched the car on the side of the road, not far from town, and hitchhiked the rest of the way back. I eventually got back to civilization and beg my family to scrounge up enough money to book a flight home. God knows I won't ever make that drive again across that desert, or any driving through the night for probably the rest of my life. That officer died for me, and I left him there and didn't even tell anyone what had happened. So I'm writing this now to warn people. If you ever find yourself crossing the desert past dark, drive slow and keep your eyes peeled. You never know what's out there just beyond the reach of your lights. Story 11. If you value your life, do not go fishing in Blackstone Quarry. I have worked as a conservation officer for the Department of Natural Resources for 15 years. Last week was my last. I don't even care that I was only a few years from receiving my piddly-ass pension from the state. I don't care if I have to spend the rest of my life picking gum and chewing up tobacco out of urinals at the truck stop. I am done. Being a game warden for 15 years will get you used to seeing some pretty nasty stuff. Animal entrails become as standard to you as $20 bills to a bank teller. And just like a bank teller, no matter how many you handle, you don't get paid anymore. If that were the case, I wouldn't have so many stains in my truck from gas station pizza. Much of your time will be spent dragging bloated roadkill out from the middle of the road. I've seen deer so distended that they will crack and split like an old basketball you left outside too much as a kid. This year I was able to switch assignments and therefore areas. I don't know if it's because of my years of dedication and hard work, or just because my boss has looked at me like a charity case ever since my sister drowned 5 years ago. I don't care, it keeps him off my back. Also, this area doesn't have a highway cutting through the middle of it. So that means roadkill is at a minimum. A few months in, and I was really enjoying the freedom that the remoteness has given me. I rarely see any other wardens, so I could be a little more lax on the requirements and duties. My signal here is always spotty, so if I want to slack off a little and get lunch, I can just mute my radio and blame it on a bad connection. Then, I'm free to head to the diner a few miles up the street and chow down. The owner knows I'm not supposed to do that, but she doesn't care. Hell, half the time I go there I see high schoolers smoking butts out of the ashtray or bumming cigarettes. It scared the shit out of them to see me pull up until they started to recognize I'm not a state trooper. Now when I go they try to bum cigs off of me. I would tell them that I had quit and they would do their best to forget that next time they saw me. Part of the area I managed was a place called Blackstone Quarry. It was an old quarry for many years and provided the town with the majority of its income. Eventually the owner, Mr. Blackstone, started to ignore the geologists in the pursuit of lining his pockets. And guess what? They hit water. A lot of water. Flooded the whole bottom of the quarry. Fearing potential litigation, Mr. Blackstone so generously decided to donate all of the land to the government for a cheap price. They were forming a plan for a hydroelectric dam, and the quarry's placement made for a good inundation zone. That way, if the dam were to malfunction, the overflow would only fill the quarry more. It malfunctioned. The flood was for the most part contained. A few people, including a game warden, were swept away. But it was nothing a few greased palms couldn't cover up. Most families like mine just got a very sincere apology. They could have at least paid for the flowers, let alone the $1,000 tombstone I had to inscribe her name on. All manner of new opportunities opened up. Countless creatures from the lake flooded into the quarry, and a new job as warden opened up. On the bright side, the town had a brand new scenic fishing spot, and I had a new job. Seeing the water did sometimes send a chill down my spine, but I only really had to go there in the winter when it was all frozen. And hey, maybe in some ironic twist, I could save another family from the same water that broke mine apart. In the 3rd month, I found the first body. Winter had started to set in, and someone had decided their need for a cold fish outweighed the need to read the warning signs of thin ice over a spring. They cracked right through into the center of the lake. They must have been an out-of-towner because no one had noticed that they had been down there for days. They had eventually washed to the surface when the ice waned after a streak of unusual warmer January days. The fish did a number on them. The body was frayed and shredded like a moth-chewed sweater. The most unusual detail was a circular puncture wound in what remained of the neck. As I stood there, the scent of decay, our decay, the decay of my fellow human being, saturated the air in my nose and mouth. I could feel the liquid burn of vomit slithering and twisting its way from my stomach and up my throat like a serpent. My mouth coated itself with frantic saliva. It's strange, you know. I've seen so many dead animals that I rarely even feel anything anymore. And yet, even though barely enough remained to tell me I was looking at a human, I could feel my body rejecting what lay before me. Some ancient forgotten voice in my mind would do nothing but just softly cry one word: run. It took smoking a whole pack of menthols in the gas station parking lot just to flush the stench of that air, the taste of that air, out of the back of my throat. I tried to quit that day. My boss, Jeff, sat me down and tried to rationalize that this can happen and that my job was so important I mustn't abandon it. I knew it was all bullshit. He just couldn't get anyone else to fill the position. I had told him that I wanted to help protect people and prevent what happened to Laura when I started the new assignment. He said that staying at this job is what Laura would have wanted. I hated it when he said her name. The word curdled in his acrid, tobacco-stuffed mouth like expired cream. I hated that I knew how that word would sound when he added, "I love you," before it. I hated him. He hated me. I knew it, he knew it. But unfortunately, he was right. Laura would be proud of me for doing what I'm doing. I was honoring her memory. So, I went back to work, keeping a close eye on those who returned when the lake finally refroze, while keeping myself as far away from the water as possible. I would always keep an eye out, especially before sunset, to make sure no one was fishing after dark. When the time would come, people would side-eye me and my government plates and reluctantly pack up their saws and rods and head back home. I began to relax a little. The quarry was beautiful, almost hauntingly so. It had a hypnotizing natural beauty despite its unnatural creation. I had heard very few things about that incident since. The body was matched up with a missing person report put out in the next town over. The rest of what I heard was just paranoid theories from the town drunks. It's funny how everyone's source is always they. They said that the coroners had to resort to dental identification. They said that the government had swept in and took the body away. They say that the government let a bunch of chemicals leach from that research lab nearby. And that's why the ice was so thin and the snapping turtles get so big and so mean, and probably why they haven't had a steady job or relationship in 20 years. They sure knows a lot. Maybe someday, one of these wise alcoholics will let me meet their buddy, so I can ask them why his friends won't shut the hell up. It was one night, I was sitting by the quarry monitoring the fishers. It was a windy day, so not many anglers. Most everybody had left hours ago. I decided to pack it on myself a bit early. They wouldn't know. I would turn off my radio and leave in the truck. Lie that I called in at the end of my shift, but the signal had gotten lost in the valley. Then I would take a cursory look around and see if anyone remained on the ice and go home. As I walked around looking for any remaining fishers, I heard something. A woman was screaming, calling out for help. I had felt that same feeling when I saw that corpse. I heard that same ancient voice in my memory saying that same word, run. But the word felt different. I didn't need to run, but I needed to run towards it, to save this person from the same fate that fell upon my sister. So I did. I ran, ignoring the cold wind stinging my ears and burning my lungs. I ran as the screaming got louder and louder, and the wind swirled the sound around my ears, twisting around me like rope. I ran. Saplings whipped my face, and brush seized my feet, commanding me to stay in place. When I reached the shoreline, I looked out into the water. It was almost completely dark by then. With my flashlight, I probed the ice's surface. I spotted a large break in the ice about 20 yards out. I ran as fast as I could, ignoring any safety measures. I looked into the water, but I heard nothing, I saw nothing. There was no discarded fishing gear, no disruption of the snow to show someone had tried to clamber out of the water. Just a clean break in the ice. The ice was thick, almost a foot, more than enough to support even the heaviest of fishermen. I felt my knees. My radio, my fucking radio. How stupid am I? It was nowhere on my belt. I sprinted back to my truck, turned on my radio, and, ringing every last whisper of air left in my lungs, called for assistance. Help arrived and scanned, scoured, did everything short of dredging the reservoir. Yet they found nothing. No bodies were reported. No vehicles were found in any of the parking areas or on the sides of the access roads. Nothing. Days passed. No missing person report was ever filed in any of the nearby towns. I still had no idea where that sound came from. where that break came from. Weeks passed, the fishing increased, and so did my intake of nicotine. Public curiosity faded, and I started to feel like one of the guys that believes what they had to say. I started listening intently to rumors I had previously dismissed. I would pore through any records I could find that even mentioned the quarry or of the government building nearby. Anything about deaths or disappearances before I started working here. Nothing. I could barely even find anything about the deaths in the flood. Just a few sparse obituaries in the newspapers. Another slow day of fishing passed, overcast and windy. The sunset did not even try to break the blockade of clouds it faced. It was now late February, and while still breezy, the wind didn't sound so murderous. I shuddered when I got out of my vehicle to make the rounds. The air felt like it did when I heard that scream. If I let my mind unfocus, the wind itself almost whispered to me about it. But I tried to stay focused. I turned as much away from the quarry as I could while still looking at it, and failed to light another cigarette. I condemned myself for always impulse buying those cheap lighters at the gas station. Defeated, I stuffed the lighter back in my pocket. I thought to myself maybe I could get a little buzz if I just chewed on it for a while. I want to walk my rounds and tell everyone to wrap it up and head to shore. The few remaining anglers gathered their things and whatever creatures they ripped from the depths and went to search for their vehicles in the fading sunlight. I heard again, that same scream for help. I looked around to see if anyone else had heard, but everyone else had gotten into their vehicles and left already. I rushed out, flashlight and radio ready. I spotted a break in the ice. Far out into the lake, someone was thrashing wildly in the water. They were screaming. The closer I drew to them, the less the scream sounded like words, and the harsher and grittier it grew in my ears. Again, that ancient word entered my head, clawing its way to the front of my attention. This time was only said once. Run. It echoed in my skull like a shattered wine glass. The feeling made me want to run away, not to run forward and save them. What was wrong with me? I needed to save this woman. I choked it down and ran closer. I could see her distant silhouette thrashing wildly, desperately trying to grasp at anything that she could hold on to. I hastened my pace, the adrenaline and my own cold, leaking eyes blurring my vision. As I dived forward to grab her outstretched arm, my flashlight and radio clattered onto the ice. In the dark, I felt around her arm. It was bare, slick, and cold from the water. I pulled it as hard as I could, trying to free her. She tried to pull herself up from the ice, but she was heavy, resilient even. Her grip tightened. I felt a sting in my hands where she had grasped me. My feet edged closer to the water. She wasn't pulling herself from the ice. She was pulling me under it. I then realized her screaming had ceased. I strained my eyes to see her arm was black and shiny. And it was long, far too long. As I lay on my back, trying to pull away, I realized that it stretched the entire length of my body. Its hand flattened and stretched out, wrapping its glistening, barbed edges around my hands. It now completely encompassed both of my hands down to my wrist. I could feel sharp jabs, almost like needles digging into the skin on my hands, tearing my flesh. Then I smelled it, that familiar odor that had invaded my senses and permeated my very skin. That odor that I had smelled when I discovered that corpse on the shore. That ancient word from that ancient voice grew from a vestigial echo into the only thing that I could hear. As my body was slowly dragged into the water, the suggestion of a face crested over the edge of the ice, lit cautiously by the discarded electric light. As the visage breached, I could see that large lacerations seemed to separate the face into quarters. I saw as the quarters separated and a thick barbed tentacle squirmed from between them. The face continued to peel back and bloom like a grotesque lily. The appendage rose overhead, twitching like a hound scenting the air, then struck towards me. I threw myself to the side as the probe plunged deep into the ice next to me. But my effort was not enough as one of the barbs sliced my cheek deeply. My molars felt cool air as my cheek split, forcibly lengthening my grimace. This cold sensation was quickly resolved by the searing heat of pain like no other. As the tentacle tried to wrench itself from the ice, I took the opportunity to free myself. I ripped my right hand free and the grasping hooks of the creature rendered my skin. Pain roared through my arm as my face felt the warm spray of my own blood. I reached for the pistol on my hip, trying to thumb the latch of my holster with my parody of a hand, making everything it touched slick and glossy. With great effort, I cleared the barrel from its holster and pointed it at the water. Bullets ripped into the ice and water, the pistol's harsh report whelming my own cries of pain, anger, and primordial violence. I felt my left hand quickly slip free from its cutting bonds as the writhing dark mass of flesh reeled and slumped back into the water. I clawed my way back onto the ice and attempted to stand. No use. It was dark now. Very dark. My ears were ringing and mucus heaved from my mouth and nose, forming a sea foam froth at the corners of my newly widened mouth. I pulled my way back toward the shore in my truck, holding the flashlight in my teeth so I did not miss it. I could hear the ice lazily creaking as if waking up from a long sleep. Thump! I hastened my crawl. Thump! The slamming sent tremors through the stubborn ice beneath me. Very faintly, I swear I could hear a woman screaming. It sounded muffled. Softly, it resonated through the ice. Then again. Thump! By the third thump, I had reached the edge of the quarry. It seemed to stop, but I could not be sure. I clambered into my vehicle and started the engine. I stripped the cold, wet clothes off my near hypothermic body. I turned the heat all the way up and twisted the radio volume knob, so hard it snapped off in my hand, the harsh static cooing to me like a mother to her child. There I laid, curled up until the blackness at the edge of my vision slowly encompassed everything. I was told that some workers from the hydroelectric plant found me in my vehicle the next morning in a state of prolonged shock. The car battery drained and the gas tank dry. Blood and a viscous black liquid covered much of the upholstery and side panel of the vehicle. They did not say much about the nature of the wounds. They tried to convince me I must have taken a tumble off of one of the cliffs by the shore and got cut up by briars and rocks before falling through the ice. I did not try to fight them on the matter. I knew nothing I could say about it would be believed. They had already looked at me differently ever since I had reported the screaming. I had asked if they had searched, and they told me that the workers from the plant were unable to find any evidence of foul play, that my blood and fingerprints were the only thing found in the area, and the ice had already begun to refreeze by the time they had arrived, and that there was no reason to delve further. They were even kind enough to send flowers to my hospital room. Story 12. My neighbors joined a book club that only reads one book. I learned what they were reading. It started with one small mention from Mrs. Burton, our neighborhood's grandma. My parents were in our backyard, doing the garden, when she came by with a carrot cake. "Hi, Mrs. Burton," I said. She nodded, smiling, and approached my parents. As I pulled out weed, I overheard them talking about the McField's missing son, the Grover's ugly new lawn that was ruining the image of the neighborhood, and Cormac Stanner's brand new car, which had windows so dark you couldn't see inside. You really should look into joining the Manuscript Book Club. It helped me a lot. Things were so hard after Ben passed away, but I'm so much better now. I had someone to talk to. My life had purpose, she said to my parents in that pleasant motherly voice. "Thanks, Mrs. Burton. We'll give it a thought," my mom said, taking the carrot cake from her. Mrs. Burton was your regular sweet old lady. She used to live with her husband, Ben, but he passed away last year. Poor Mrs. Burton was in absolute anguish for the past year, until she appeared to us, spriteful and lively. I thought that she had recovered and found purpose living alone. My phone vibrated. It was my best friend, Zoe. I went onto our front porch to return her text. My parents didn't want me talking to Zoe. Damn street rat. Horrible influence on a girl, my dad would often say. We went to the same class from high school until college. She was an orphan and would frequently get in trouble for all sorts of things, hot wiring a teacher's car and driving it around the school, planting a farting balloon under the teacher's seat, starting food fights, and the list went on. But Zoe was always friendly and protective of me. We became friends after she defended me from a school bully using water balloons. Bored out of my mind. WYD, she texted. Not much. Doing the garden with my parents. I was texting her and looking at Mrs. Burton, who returned to her house and took out a chair on her front lawn and sat down. She faced the direction of the Grovers, probably musing over how ugly their new lawn was. We lived in a cul-de-sac. There were around 12 families, including ours. We were the kind of neighborhood where most families are wealthy and have a cared-for lawn and 2 kids, normal and boring. Things are going well for my family, at least until that day. Our family was on a road trip. We stopped for a pee break. My mom went into a deep bush while my dad stood behind a large boulder. I was in the front seat, typing away at my phone. Jason, my little brother, was in the back seat looking out of the car. Megan, look, a fox with a strange ear. Look, it's green. I ignored him. A 5-year-old sees all sorts of things. I shouldn't have. I looked up just in time to see him opening the car door and running outside. It happened in the blink of an eye. A truck passed by the road. It didn't stop in time. All I could hear was a loud hissing of the brake pads grinding, and then the skidding sound of tires. And then a loud thud followed by silence. Just like that, my little brother was killed. We were devastated after the accident. My parents didn't blame me, but I did. I should have talked to him, should have looked after him. Instead, I glued my eyes to my phone, talking to Zoe about the latest song by some indie band, and my brother was dead. For weeks, we barely left the house. I sometimes wandered to Jason's room and sat there looking at the paintings that he made on the wall and crying alone. The neighbors were very understanding and gave us plenty of gifts, cakes, and condolences, but we'd trade them all for Jason back in an instant. We weren't the only family with grief. Every single family in our neighborhood lost someone. Mrs. Burton lost her husband. The Grovers lost their daughter. Cormac Stanner lived alone, but his dog got sick and died. Each of us lost someone dear, so the McFields were understandably worried about their missing son. They put up posters, asked for help on the local radio station, and had volunteer groups searching for him in the surrounding forests. Then I started noticing something strange. First, only Mrs. Burton would put out a chair on her lawn, facing the Grovers' house. But then, the McFields did the same thing. After that, Cormac Stanner bought an entire recliner on his front porch facing the same direction. The Smiths followed, and the Whitakers installed a porch swing. Every day, in the afternoon, they would go to the same spot and look at the Grovers' house for an hour. Eventually, my family was the only one left not taking part in the strange observation. Soon, everything became even stranger. I started hearing voices in the night. I knew it was not a dream. I heard it coming from the direction of the Grovers. It sounded like some people were chanting in unison. I eventually chalked it up to some kind of new song they were practicing for Christmas and put on my muffler and fell back asleep. Then the visit started. At first, it was only Mrs. Burton. She would come by and leave us the occasional carrot cake, a batch of chocolate chips cookies, or fresh apples from the tree in her backyard. She would talk about how hard it must have been for us, dealing with Jason's death. Then the Smiths come by with fish from their weekend trip, the Grovers with deer meat from their hunt. Even Cormac Stanner visited us with wine, wearing his garish rainbow sweater. They would all tell us how sorry they were about Jason and then recommend us to take part in the neighborhood book club called the Manuscript. Even my parents saw how weird the whole thing was. They politely declined at first. Your weirdo neighbors give me the creeps. Can never wrap my head around rich people, Zoe texted me when I told her about it. After the shock of Jason's death faded, something broke in my family. Our dinners were starting to fill with uncomfortable silence, like something was missing. My parents started to argue, then fight, then after that there would be no apology. I was afraid of being caught in the middle, so I started eating dinner in my room. That was when I was able to observe that the entire neighborhood, save for our family, started gathering at the Grovers at around 8 in the evening. I never saw them leaving. Somehow, they would all be up and about, as usual the morning after. Then I started to see my neighbors do this weird exercise where they would kneel down on the grass and put their hands together as if holding up a book. Then they would move their hands forward and bow their heads down close to the ground. They would repeat this 3 times before standing up and going about their days as usual. What was awful was that the neighbors' visits were starting to get to my mom. She mentioned joining the book club a few times to my dad. They just seemed like a bunch of weirdos to me. What will reading books do to help us get over Jason? This town's gone crazy enough with news of people hitting their heads, then rumors of shadows killing people. We best keep to ourselves, he said one evening, and their conversation once again turned into an argument. Every time Mrs. Burton dropped by and Dad wasn't home, my mom would ask her about the book club. She asked whether there was a membership fee or anything special one had to do. Turns out, it was just a normal book club, save for the fact that they only read one book called the manuscript. Things were bad, but they were tolerable. It wasn't until Mom went behind Dad's back to attend a reading session of the book club that everything turned out horrible. That morning, my dad said he had some business to take care of in town and wouldn't be back till the evening. Mrs. Burton came by and talked about the book club again. "You really should think about it, dear. We're having a reading session today. Would you care to join us, just for 15 minutes? My mom hesitated, then nodded her head. 15 minutes turned out to be 2 hours, and when my dad was home early, she was still in the Grover's house, taking part in the little book club. He called her phone. She didn't pick up. He ran around like a madman around the neighborhood looking for her, with me following. And when we saw her through the glass panels of the Grovers, I guess something inside him snapped. He practically dragged her out of their house, and my dad was generally a gentle person. He told her that he would not have his wife take part in some crazy club, that it sounded just like a religious cult. At least they listened to me. "You controlling and abusive asshole. When was the last time you did that?" she screamed in his face. I didn't know whose side to take. They were both right. I was torn and felt horrible, so I ran to my room and called Zoe. "I'm really sorry you had to go through that. One of the reasons why I'm glad to be an orphan sometimes. No family drama," she said. Things started to go downhill. My parents were no longer eating in the same room. My mom ignored my dad and went to the book club more regularly. She started coming home later and later. Sometimes I wouldn't even see her the entire evening. My dad started to spend more and more time in his office. Sometimes he didn't even come home. I felt ignored and lonelier than ever. I felt like I was some sort of obstacle to prevent them from a divorce and just ending the miserable pain that was their failing marriage. I spent most of my time cooped up in my room. For once I was glad that the new college semester was coming. It would mean time in the city and away from all of this. In my neighborhood, the strangeness was just ramping up. Mrs. Burton used to be a gentle and caring old lady, but every time I passed by her, she would shoot me this stare as if I was some sort of street hooker. She wasn't the only one. The Grovers would also give me strange looks whenever I walked outside their house. Cormac Stanner once looked ready to hunt me down. It wasn't just me. My dad also got the same treatment. We somehow became enemies of the neighborhood. That night, I packed my things and was ready to head to college early. I figured I would spend a couple of days at the dorm reading books. Anything to escape from the hellhole I was in. I asked Zoe to drop by my house. I'd wanted her to sleep over before going to the college with me in the morning. My parents didn't care anymore. My dad said nothing, and my mom immediately went to the Grover's house after dinner. Zoe and I went to our room and chatted till it was night. I didn't see my mom get back home until 10 p.m. From my window on the second floor, I could see nervousness on her face but didn't think much of it. Downstairs, it seemed my parents had started to put on makeup because I could hear music and the faint voice of my mom telling my dad that they should get a drink. I was relieved and went to sleep. Zoe woke me that night. She pressed a finger to her lips and pointed me to the window. I looked at the clock. It was 3 a.m. There were several people in dark robes, and they were lining up to enter my house. I heard our front door being opened, then the creaking sounds of footsteps over old woods. I was scared out of my mind. I thought they were burglars and took out my phone to call 911. Zoe put her ears to the door of my room, and after a moment, her eyes widened. She rushed back to bed and told me to pretend I'm sleeping. I shut my eyes as hard as I could and tried my best to not move, but my heart was jumping inside my chest. "She's sleeping." I heard a male voice. It seemed to be Henry Grover. "We'll come back for her." This time was a female voice. It sounded a lot like Kathy McField. And with that, they walked out of our bedroom. We both waited for what seemed like forever, until Zoe slowly got up and peeked outside the window. "Look, they're taking someone," she said and gestured outside. My blood froze the moment I caught eye of who they were taking. It was my dad. He looked like he was still asleep while being carried by his arms and legs. "What the hell is wrong with rich people?" Zoe whispered. "We have to follow them," I said, putting on my hoodie and taking my wallet and phone with me as a habit. We took slow and small steps to not creak the stairs. I looked at my mom's bed. It was empty. We crept downstairs and outside, just as one of the robed people closed the door to the Grover's house. We looked around for a moment, and then crouched slowly to the Grovers. We had to know what they were doing, but I couldn't come up with anything. Just then, light lit up from the basement. I suddenly recalled that the Grovers' basement had a window. Me and Zoe got to it, making sure to stay hidden from view and only peeking in. In the middle of the basement was a circle of people. They were all facing an altar, on top of which was a closed notebook with a brown leather cover. Then, two men carried my dad to the middle of the circle. "We are the children of the manuscript, and the manuscript is our lifeblood," the robed people said in unison 3 times. My hand trembled, sweat dotting my fingers. Then, a small and familiar figure stepped forward, then removed their robe, and I had to put my hand over my mouth to keep from screaming. It was my mom. "We offer this child to the manuscript, so that his eyes may be opened," she said, and took out a knife. "Oh my God, she's going to kill your dad. Call the cops, call them now." Zoe hissed. I took my phone out of my pocket, but my hand was too sweaty, and the phone wouldn't recognize my fingerprint or face in the darkness. All the while, my eyes were glued to the window. The 2 men were holding up my dad now. My mom was approaching him with a knife. I thought about screaming out loud to stop them, but something was holding me back. She raised the knife, my eyes burned from not blinking. Then she took my dad's hand and made a small cut on his index finger. "We offer this child to the manuscript, so that his eyes may be opened. His blood will be the price for initiation," she said, and opened the book on the altar and held his hand over it. Blood dripped from his finger to the notebook and disappeared. Then my dad's head jerked up, his eyes open wide. A green jet of light entered from the book to his eyes. Then he drooped back down. At this point, I was practically frantic. Zoe put her hand over my mouth and shook her head. She pointed to a corner in the room. My heart sank. There was a shotgun, and next to it, a cage that held a fox with a clipped ear that was painted bright green. At that moment, I felt something in the air, like being watched from behind. Then I heard footsteps. "Now what do we have here? Peeping Toms?" a voice called out to us. I was startled. The people in the basement also heard it. Their eyes darted up to where we were standing in unison. I turned around. It was Cormac Stanner. "We were saving this as a present for you, Megan. It seems you have found your way to us anyway. Ready to accept the blessing of the manuscript?" he asked. His face began to contort into a weird smile, and his eyes opened wide. "Run!" Zoe screamed. I bolted, but his hands caught me. I struggled and thrashed to no effect. Then Zoe came back and started picking up rocks on the ground and threw them in his face, making loud thuds. "It's Megan we want. You can scurry off now," he said, shrugging off her attacks like they were nothing. Desperate, I began punching him in the face. That was when I realized his smile never left and his eyes never blinked. I was absolutely freaked out. Then Zoe jumped in front of him and kicked him square in the balls. Cormac Stanner dropped to the ground, his hands holding his crotch, but still smiling, and his eyes would not blink. Then we heard a click. The Grovers' front door opened, and light streamed out. More than a dozen people spilled out and removed their robes. Henry and Martha Grover, Kathy and Abel McField, Gavin and Chloe Smith, Alexander and Lydia Whitaker, many others, and even Mrs. Burton, and finally my mom and dad. They looked at us. Then their faces warped into a smile that was way too wide. Their eyes opened and unblinking. There was a period of silence. The air reeked of wet grass and rot. I saw the truth in the manuscript, honey. It helped me move on. It would help you too, my mom said before her mouth turned into a smile again. That's right, honey. I was blind, but now my eyes are open. The manuscript can do the same to you, my dad said. Zoe and I were backing up slowly as the row of people advanced. Slowly, their hands moved in front of them and made a motion as if to hold a book. We turned and ran. They ran after us, their legs running, but their arms still making the book-reading motion and the smiles never leaving their faces. Zoe pointed at Cormac Stanner's car, and we rushed to it. She took out a screwdriver and did something with the door. The sounds of shoes rapping on the concrete were very close now. I was screaming at the top of my lungs for her to hurry up. She opened the car door, and we rushed in just as hands almost grabbed my feet. We held the car door closed while the group of people stood all around it. Zoe ducked down the driver's seat and brought out some wires. "I'm gonna hot wire this thing." "Ever drove a car?" she asked me. Kinda," I stammered, my mind blank. The people were surrounding the car now. Zoe successfully primed the car, and the engine started. We switched seats, and I looked up to see that my parents were standing in front of the car. "There's no point running, honey," they told me, their unblinking eyes boring a straight hole to my soul. Zoe looked at me. Our hands found each other. "Shit, looks like no way out," she said. "What the hell do we do?" I asked her. "Hey, Megan, can I borrow your hoodie? I always wanted to wear it. Figured I'd want to wear it once before they caught us." I thought it was a strange request, but listen anyway. I took my hoodie and gave it to her. She put it on and gave me a look, tears in her eyes. "Love you more than anything. Come back to save me, okay? Best friends forever," she said, before pulling the hood down her face and rushing out of the car through the line of people. They ran after her. I wanted to open the car door, but something inside me screamed not to. I gave her a tearful look goodbye and slammed on the gas pedal. The car darted away from the neighborhood, away from my childhood, from my parents' failing marriage, from the manuscript, and from Zoe. That was 3 weeks ago. I've been running ever since. New town, new place to crash every few days, never the same place twice. I slept in charity homes and ate their meals. I changed my SIM card. I thought I was safe. Then today, the manager at my latest charity home delivered a speech. "We're starting a new book club to help those in mental pain. We'll be reading the manuscript," he said, his smile too wide. My hair stood on its end. Story 13. I was late for class and wish I hadn't been. The blood on the ceiling never really dried. The image still burned in my mind. I pulled a bottle of beer out of the fridge, the cool bottle kissing my hand with a cold relief. I have a late lecture today and figure it couldn't hurt. It's not like I'm getting drunk. Just something to take the edge off. It's not like one beer could make me any dumber than my classmates. They never fail to surprise me with their stupid questions and opinions. My brother Emmett always kept the fridge stocked, so I never complain and drink when I feel like it. I stepped over a lump of clothes, a few textbooks, and a couple boxes for pizza night, making my way over to the table where my bag was sprawled out along with various assignments, textbooks, and some of my brother's garbage. I slid my Swiss Army knife from my backpack strap pocket and flicked the bottle opener attachment out of its red body. I popped the cap and guzzled the refreshing golden liquid. My brother walked out of his bedroom, his eyes fixing to the bottle opener in my hand, a disappointed look forming in his dark brown eyes. "I don't get why you keep that thing," he said with that confident tone. The kind of confidence that cuts deep, whether it's kindness or cruelty behind it. "Well, I don't see a problem keeping it," I replied, a little annoyed. "There's no point holding on to it just because it was Dad's. He was never there for us, and he made that clear until the very end." His words burned my ears like pouring alcohol on a fresh cut. "It's just a knife. And besides, it's the only good one I have," my voice sounding meager as I bit the inside of my cheek. "Whatever." He turned his back to me, piling his textbook and some crinkled papers into his bag. "We should get to class. And besides, today's the day we finally get to show them how smart we are." A small grin washed over his face. I leaned my head back and chugged the rest of my beer. I locked the dorm door, and we made our way to our class, which was, conveniently, on the other side of campus. The halls are bleak and boring like usual. Think a cheap community college inside of a 1960s bomb shelter. Yellow-peeling scale-like paint barely held onto the walls. We walked with a decent pace through the many halls which all looked bland and the same. The lights gave off their usual buzz. It's not like the normal buzz that most people are used to. The kind of buzzing that causes an instant migraine. We continued through the halls, not making eye contact with each other or anyone. We don't really chat much. I guess when you've known someone your whole life, eventually you run out of stuff to talk about. But he always speaks up when I need him, and sometimes when I wish I didn't need him. He's always been the better brother. Popular, good at sports, and good-looking. Most parents say that they love their kids equally, but in reality, that's impossible. Even the best parents know there's always a child you like more. Classroom 311. We walked in the open door. The classroom was unimpressive, to say the least. This was not a lecture hall full of intellectuals. Think of a crammed high school classroom with poor lighting. I could feel the shift as I stepped through. The air turned stale and thick. Who would invent a building with no windows? We sat in our usual spot in the back corner, which was typically either unoccupied or a couple late students would sneak in and sit there. That made it our best bet to avoid the prying eyes of our instructor and students, if you want to call them that. Most of them were hardly students, since you'd expect college students to have intelligence above an 8th grade level, wouldn't you? They all stared at the instructor with glazed-over eyes. This wasn't an ordinary group of young adults you see on the street. Somehow everyone at this school was ugly. I'm not sure how a school could attract only deformed, weird, and misshapen faces. Sometimes they reminded me of rats. Yeah, I guess that's a good way to describe them. Rats, but obviously human, just rat-like. The instructor finished stating the exam rules and handed out our Unit 1 exam. I'm nervous, even though I shouldn't be. With my lucky number 11 pencil in hand, I opened the first page of the exam. The first couple were easy, but then I reached a couple of real stumpers. I looked over at my brother, who was peeking down toward his crotch. I knew he was using his phone. I didn't want to. I already have decent grades, way above passing. His head turned to me a little bit, not trying to make it too obvious. Bro used ChatGPT. We gotta get out of this shit school, he whispered audibly. The volume shocked me as my eyes darted around for onlookers, ears ringing. Section 2. There's one bright spot, one glimmer in this sea of decay. That's why when I finished the test, I didn't leave. I watched this girl, Maria. Every guy in the class probably thinks she's the hottest. They're right, but those vermin don't deserve her. I love how she dresses. She knows exactly how much to show and how much to hide. Calculated and intelligent, just like her. The light above her flickered as my eyes meandered up her physique. Please turn your tests. I jumped. We were one of the first ones out of the room, and he pulled me to the side of the door. I saw you staring at her, eyes peering into my soul. Even though we are not twin brothers, I always felt that soul connection. Yes, so what? You should talk to her. Please, for me. He's right, but I'm not good with the ladies like he is. I avoided eye contact with him and took a deep breath. Students were piling out of the door like a stampede. The whole world slowed down when she walked by. But she kept her head down. I swear I got a high. Maybe it wasn't loud enough, but I did. It doesn't matter anyways. She wasn't looking. I turned back to him. He was clearly unimpressed. Well, that didn't go well, he said, noticing my disappointment. She'd be lucky to have you. Don't waste it. He grabbed me by the shirt and pulled me in the direction she was heading. It was easy to find her. She was wearing a blue top in a crowd of dull colors. We kept a steady pace behind her. I want to talk to her, but I know I'll lock up, shut down, and embarrass myself. And besides, I'm happy watching this goddess from afar. We continued through the halls into a part of the school I'm not familiar with. This area is even darker, and the air feels moist and musty. I will never understand this maze of hallways and how it takes 10 turns to go from building A to building C. They probably want you to get lost so they can charge your parents for another semester. They couldn't even keep the time right between buildings. Somehow, when I left Building 1, it was 5:30 and I arrived at Building B at 7:11. We were nearing the exit to the train station, and we both knew it. Don't be a pussy. Go talk to her, he said sternly, looking at me with intensity. I began to move my feet faster and made some distance. Just behind Maria, a sound rumbled in my chest, but all that came out was a pathetic peep. She disappeared out the door, her blue shirt slipping away like a day's sky into dawn, and ultimately the dark of night. I could feel the same transition deep in my stomach. I let out a loud, long exhale. Good job, man. I seriously thought you had it this time, he said, clearly disappointed, but somehow with no sympathy. My body vibrated, eyes and lips twitching uncontrollably. I heard the murmurs of students, the side eyes, the laughter. I felt the overwhelming urge to slap him. Dad never minded a bit of rough housing. I remember that day, fighting in the hot sun, as Dad washed the blood off his hands and dug a hole. I slapped hard, my hand hot and full of rage. Sometimes brothers fight. Section 3. As I looked out the dorm window, I couldn't help but notice the comical contrast of the vitality of summer and the emptiness of this place. The semester was horrible. Even cheating barely kept our marks up. Stress was high. What used to be encouragement turned cynical and overbearing. But I get it. We were both under stress to get out of here. I pulled my head out of the clouds and looked at the clock. Damn, 4:11. I was going to be late and still had to trek across the whole school. I'm so fucked. Today we review for our final exam, and the instructor practically tells us what's on the exam. I leaped up and shouted towards the bedrooms. Let's go, we're late. I vaulted over the mini pizza boxes which grazed my knees. I pulled my number 11 pencil from the dark pile that consumed our kitchen table and shoveled it into my bag. It was my last one. Of course I could buy more, but I've used this same brand and color since I was a kid. Dad used to buy them for me. Sparky would chew the erasers. I felt my body jerk. I shouldn't be reminiscing on bullshit. I need to hurry up. I rushed outside without locking the door. He'll do it. We were speed walking through the narrow, dim halls. Faces blurring as we sped past. Eyes so dark and lifeless. This really is where the dull souls go to die. Buzzing so strong it forced its way into my throat. The metallic taste, thick blood. We passed Section C. I looked at the clock. 4:22. Fuck. Why didn't you wake me up? His voice sounded like he just got out of bed. We kept rushing through the hallways. The halls are more narrow in this section. We were shoulder to shoulder. Less and less students passed until the halls were eerily empty. Complete silence except for the buzzing. But the building radiated. You could feel it. All the busy people, the failures, the hate, and the drama soaked into the walls. 5:11. Are we lost? My body flew back as he yanked my backpack. This is exactly why you don't rush ahead of me like this, he said, catching his breath. You're basically a lost puppy. Like you know who. Heat radiated out of me. My hands burning hot. My face tingling and aching. I never meant to leave the door open. I was 11 years old. How would I know Sparky would run that quick? I closed my eyes and I could see the tail lights and Sparky's crushed skull. I'm so tired of this. Just follow me. Section 4. 4:44. How the fuck did it take us 30 minutes to get here? I stumbled into class, knowing any minute missed could be lost GPA. The air was foul, not just the usual stuffy. Putrid, like there was rotting garbage somewhere the janitor missed. Our usual seat was open, but of course someone was sitting close. We quietly shuffled over. The smell of roses lifted me up. This trespasser was not an ordinary human. It was Maria. She must have snuck in late. My hand trembled. Isn't that the girl you like? He smiled like a kid in a candy shop. I nodded. You have to talk to her. Don't fuck it up like usual. I exhaled. I tell you what, if you talk to her, pizza is on me. One asshole. We sat down. One seat between me and this goddess. My heart slowed. I'd never seen her this close. Her skin glowed in the light, her aura radiating. I looked for a moment too long, my eyes darting away. I'm not a fuck up. I'm not a fuck up. I'm not a fuck up. The words repeated in my head. I closed my eyes. I heard my brother's voice, the things I didn't do, things I didn't say, the mistakes. But this is my time to shine. I turned my head to Maria with a small forced smirk. Hi. It came out quiet, but it actually came out. I was doing it. Her head turned towards me, hair flowing with a small, sweet breeze caressing the air. Then the sky went dark. Her eyes, not blue, but dark and empty. Her gaze shot away as soon as we made eye contact like a mouse fixated on cheese. I could barely see the instructor's face. The shadows clung to every wrinkle, exaggerating each one until he looked deformed. The back of everyone's head blended together. A single pelt of fur. The image disgusted me. But maybe that's what I look like too. That was pathetic. His big brown eyes grew dark. I knew you'd fuck up. You always do. He now had a sinister grin. You couldn't even save Sparky. I buried my head into my hands. You couldn't even talk to her. Ringing so loud I was nauseous. My heart and hands on fire. Like how you couldn't look Dad in the eyes in his final days. You're a pussy. I dug my fingernails into the wood until they bled. The crack of a number 11 pencil made a few students jump. I stood, hands trembling. Eyes now on me. The lights, hot and bright. Without thought, only purpose. I pulled out my Swiss Army knife, extended the knife attachment, held it to his throat, his lifeless eyes and stupid fucking grin. He knew I wouldn't do it. One swift motion. Silence. Finale. Update. A few hours later. I never knew him. I've seen him around. Something was off. I've seen him talking to himself, but I try not to judge. I arrived late for class that day. I wish I had just skipped. The way he looked at me with those sad blue eyes before he did it. Sometimes when someone's jugular gets cut, their blood keeps pumping until there's none left. I learned that in biology. It shot out like a fountain, covering the floor, the desks, the ceiling. But for me, it was a shower. I never knew blood was so warm. Warm and viscous. It rained out for at least 2 minutes. Hysteria. Good thing I wore red that day. The image will forever be burned in my brain. His lifeless, drenched body. The only thing not covered in blood. A broken number 11 pencil. Story 14. I keep getting stuck between moments, and I'm terrified of what I'm starting to see there. It started 3 weeks ago when I missed my exit on the highway. Not like I was distracted and drove past it. I mean, I was in the right lane, blinking on, looking directly at the exit, and then I was 2 miles down the road with no memory of how I got there. Like someone had cut out a chunk of my life and glued the remaining pieces together. I'm 34. I don't do drugs. I barely drink. I thought maybe I'd had a small stroke or something, so I went to urgent care. They did all the tests. Everything came back normal. The doctors said stress can do weird things to memory and sent me home. It happened again 4 days later. I was pouring coffee, and then I was standing at my desk at work, coffee in hand, with no recollection of the drive. 3 hours just gone. That's when I started keeping a notebook. Timestamps. What I was doing before, what I was doing after. Looking for patterns. The gaps kept happening. Always different lengths. Sometimes seconds, sometimes hours. But here's the thing. Other people remembered those times. My coworker remembered our conversation during one of my missing hours. I'd apparently been present, functional, normal. I just couldn't remember any of it. Last week, something changed. I was at the grocery store, reaching for a box of pasta, and I got stuck. Not stuck in the memory gap, stuck in the actual moment. My hand was extended toward the shelf, and I could not complete the motion, like trying to push through water that kept getting thicker. And in that pause, that razor-thin gap between reaching and grasping, I saw them. Threads, connecting everything. Everyone, silver and gold and colors I don't have names for, running between every person in that store like a web spun by something vast and patient. And the threads were old, ancient, like they'd always been there, and I was only just now developing the eyes to see them. A woman mid-laugh, her mouth open, and her thread pulsed with light that split and ran to 7 other people in the store, including me. I felt her joy land in my chest like a stone dropped in still water, rippling outward. A tired dad with his hand on his kid's shoulder, and the thread between them was thick as rope, golden, humming with something that made my throat tight. An old man reading a label, and his thread reached backward through the store, through the walls, spiraling away to some distant point I couldn't see, but somehow knew was his mother, dead 30 years, still connected to him by a cord that death hadn't severed. I could see how we were holding each other up, how every thread tugged and was tugged in return, how nothing existed separately. We were all part of some massive weaving, some pattern being made by hands I couldn't see but could suddenly feel. Then time snapped forward and I grabbed the pasta with shaking hands and got out of there. It's happening more frequently now. These pauses. And each time I get stuck between moments, I see more of the pattern. The weaving gets clearer. Yesterday, I was at a red light and got stuck for what felt like an hour. The woman in the car next to me was crying, and I watched her thread pulse dark and bright at once, watching it connect to every loss I've ever felt, every time I've sat alone and wept. But it didn't stop with me. It ran backward through time, connecting her grief to her grandmother's grief, to her great-grandmother's grief, an unbroken cord of sorrow stretching back through generations. And forward, too, to children not yet born who would carry the same thread. We inherit the threads. We pass them on. The pattern remembers everything. I looked at my own hands and saw threads running from my fingers in every direction. Some were frayed. Some were strong. One ran directly back to my mother, pulsing with every heartbeat, the same thread that had connected us before I was born, when I was still forming inside her. Another ran to a friend I haven't spoken to in 6 years, thin but unbroken. Another to a stranger I'd smiled at in an airport 2 decades ago, the tiniest gossamer strand. But there, still there. Nothing is lost. Every moment of connection, every kindness, every time we've truly seen each other, it's all still here in the weaving. Permanent, real in a way that the physical world is not. Here's the part that terrifies me. I think I'm being pulled into the place where the weaving is made, where the hands work. I think I'm unsticking from time because time is just the speed at which we experience the pattern being woven, and I'm moving to where it exists all at once. This morning I got stuck for 6 hours. My clock said 30 seconds had passed. I was sitting at my kitchen table, and the world paused, and I saw it all. The complete pattern. Every thread that has ever connected one consciousness to another, stretching across all of human history in this incomprehensible tapestry. I saw how your joy feeds my joy feeds their joy in an endless cycle. I saw how we're all holding the same light, passing it between us like a torch that never goes out. I saw how every act of love strengthens the weaving and every act of cruelty tries to tear it, but the pattern holds. It always holds. And I saw the hands. Not human hands. Something older. Something that's been weaving since the first human looked at another human and recognized themselves. The hands move through all of us. We're the loom and the thread and the weavers all at once, acting out some pattern we can't see, but have always been creating together. When I came back, I was sobbing. Not from fear, from recognition. I've been there before. We all have. Before we were born, after we die, in every dream where we remember we're connected to everything. It's where we came from, the place between moments where the pattern lives. The gaps are getting longer. I'm spending more time there than here. My coworker said today that I stood at my desk for 20 minutes staring at nothing, but from my side it was hours deep in the weaving, watching threads pulse with light. I think soon I won't come back at all. I'll get stuck in the between place, permanently dissolved into the pattern, becoming one of the hands that weaves. I should be terrified. Every survival instinct should be screaming. But when I'm there, between the moments, I feel like I'm finally awake after a long sleep. Like I'm remembering something I was made to forget when I was born in a linear time. Your thread is here too. Right now, as you read this, I can see it stretching from you to me, thin and silver, humming with attention. The pattern connects us. The weaving holds us both. And the hands are so patient. They've been waiting for us to remember. All of us. They've been weaving since the first fire, the first story, the first time one human touched another with intention. They've been making the pattern that holds reality together. And we're all part of it, adding our threads with every choice, every connection, every moment we choose love over fear. I'm getting stuck again. The world is starting to slow. But this time I can see you in the weaving too. Your thread is pulsing. You're reading these words, and something in you remembers. Something ancient waking up. The hands recognize you. They've been waiting for you to see. It's beautiful there, in the space between, where the pattern lives. We're all connected by threads that nothing can break. Where every moment of genuine connection, every act of courage, every choice to reach out rather than pull back adds to the weaving. You're part of it too. You always have been. The thread that runs from you touches thousands of other threads, and those threads touch thousands more. Your grandmother's hands guided your hands, guiding your children's hands, all weaving together. The world is pausing now. I can feel the hands moving through me. I'm not coming back this time, but I'm not disappearing. I'm just finally seeing what I always was. What we all are. Threads in the pattern, light in the weaving, and the hands keep working, patient and ancient, making something beautiful out of all of us. Don't forget. Don't let yourself forget. You're connected. You matter. Every thread you create matters. The pattern needs you. It's so beautiful here. Can you feel your thread pulling? Story 15. My dog ate a fly. The day started with a drip from the ceiling. A pipe must have busted in the apartment above mine. It was slow at first, but then a patch of my ceiling fell out, slamming onto the floor with a wet slap. It was messy, and it scared the hell out of us. There wasn't any more water after that. I did my best to clean it all up. That day was Midas' birthday, and I wasn't going to let anything ruin it. Midas was a 7-year-old golden retriever who was a rescue. Spoiled, sweet, and sometimes dumb, he was truly man's best friend. He was my best friend. He was there for the hard parts of my life, losing my father to cancer, and when I went through the divorce. He didn't know it, but he was my strength. I would come home after a long day to a goofy smile, tail wags, and no chance to take off my shoes before being bombarded with love. It was just me, him, and a couple of goldfish. I had won them at the county fair, and was surprised they made it more than a few days, let alone 2 years. Our apartment was small, somewhat messy, and old. It was all I could afford after everything. 1 bedroom, a cramped bathroom, and a kitchen that was just a microwave and a fridge. Neighbors came and went. Some good, some bad, but mostly everyone kept to themselves. With the building falling apart and having more problems, the other apartments were mostly vacant now. For Midas' birthday, I was going to get him his favorite food, egg rolls from the Rising Sunday. It was a popular family-owned Chinese takeout place. They knew us pretty well, and they loved Midas. I ordered all kinds of food and had it delivered to us. About an hour or so passed, and there was a knock at the door. That's when everything started. As I opened the door, I was greeted by a giant of a man, someone I've never seen before. Very tall and wearing several layers of thick clothing. Very odd attire for southern Florida. I couldn't see his face because he was wearing sunglasses, a face mask, and had his hoodie up. I looked at him in shock and felt nervous. He didn't say a word. He just held his hand out, expecting me to give him something. I looked down and noticed the bag of food sitting beside him on the floor. I knew everyone at that takeout place, but I had never seen him before. Maybe he was a new hire, I thought. "Oh, I'm sorry. Are you from the Rising Sun?" I asked. No response, just still in the same position with his hand out. "I'm okay. What was the total again?" I remembered what it was. I just wanted him to break his uncomfortable silence, but there was still no response. I just gave up. I reached into my pocket and pulled out some cash. I counted out what was owed and even gave him a tip despite everything. He didn't reach for it. He didn't even budge. I awkwardly placed the money into his hand. After I did, a fly crawled out from under his sleeve and flew into my apartment. I was disgusted and weirded out. Afterwards, he finally moved. He closed his hand, gripping the cash, turned around, and walked down the hallway of the apartment building. He turned and went down the stairs, out of sight. Every shift and twist of his movements was stiff and slow. I grabbed my bag of food from off the floor, then I closed the door, making sure to lock it. What the hell was that about? I asked myself out loud. My mind was brought back from the realm of unease as I saw Midas staring at me as he sat there with his big brown eyes. His tail was sweeping back and forth. He knew what was in the bag. He could smell it. I unpacked our food and got everything together. Both of our plates were made, and I put on our favorite show, the early seasons of Scooby-Doo. Everything was going well. We were enjoying every bite and every minute. It wasn't long, however, before our enjoyment was interrupted. Fading in and out was the annoying buzzing of insect wings. Close, then far as it did pass-bys near my head. It quickly went from annoyance to near insanity with how persistent it was. I could tell it was bothering Midas as well. He ignored his food to track the fly's movements and attempted to snap it out of the air. Enough was enough. This thing needed to die. I rolled up some newspaper that was lying around, and we started the hunt. Marching from one side of the apartment to the other, going in and out of each room just to do it again and again, climbing over furniture and several miscalculated jumps, all accompanied by wacky cartoon music from the television. After an entire episode's worth of chasing the devil, it came to a satisfying end. It had landed on the arm of the couch. I slowed my movement and angled my weapon like a praying mantis. I had lost count of how many times this exact setup had occurred now, all with failure. Midas was stalking his prey, just like me, but he was quicker. The bite was swift and silent like an assassination. I knew it was over when I could hear the smacking of Midas' jowls as he chewed that son of a bitch up. Hell yeah, I shouted with excitement. Good job, birthday boy. I was praised as I covered Midas with pets and rubs. Thank you so much. I could tell he was proud of himself because his mouth curled into a smirk as his eyes squinted thin, followed by uncontrollable but wiggles. We resumed our planned activities of chowing down and watching cartoons. Our peace didn't last long, however. Midas walked over to the middle of the room and started dry heaving. I quickly got up to his aid. I rubbed and patted his sides. "You okay, bud? That fly was nasty, huh?" I asked. He threw up more than I've ever seen. It was liquidy and panned out in all directions, consisting of multicolored chunks, best described as the worst pizza I had ever seen. It's okay," I said softly to him. "Let me clean this up." He seemed fine after everything poured out of him, but I was still concerned. I took the moment to get cleaning supplies from the bathroom, since it didn't seem like an absolute emergency, and more like an upset stomach. I went and got all that I needed, only taking a couple of minutes. When I returned to the living room, I was greeted by the disgusting sound of wet slop being chewed quickly. The sound alone was enough to make me gag. I found the source on the other side of the room. Midas was not just eating the vomit. He was devouring it, like he was suffering from starvation. I rushed over to grab him by his sides to pull him away. "Stop! Bad! Stop that! Get off of that!" I commanded. He fought me with every muscle he had. He started to growl and snarl at me as he slopped the floor clean. By the time he gave in to my pull and lost tension, it was all gone. He looked at me with what seemed to be fear, and a whimper followed. His mood had flipped like a light switch. A few hours of quiet confusion passed. I stayed up much later than normal, sitting on the couch with some tea. I watched Midas the whole time. All my thoughts were of concern and fear, hoping that he would be all right, but also talking myself through grief if it was a worst-case scenario and I lost him. He was doing just fine now, like nothing ever happened. Maybe it was a one-off thing. Maybe the egg rolls were off today. Maybe I did something wrong. My thoughts raced with how I should have done things better, gone for more walks, and spent more time with him. How this whole birthday for him was just me making up for not being as good as I should have. "Shut up," I said softly to myself. I knew I couldn't bear another loss, especially not Midas, but he's right there. He's fine, and I'm just thinking the worst. The next day seemed normal for the most part. We had breakfast. Midas didn't really eat, though. I figured he wasn't feeling too well. Eventually, I went off to work. When I got home later that day, I wasn't greeted with a normal warm welcome. Instead, there was a stink in the air and garbage all over the floor. The trash can had been raided, and its contents spread everywhere. I looked for Midas and found him hiding under my bed. He had never done that before. I guess he thought I was going to be mad when I found out. "It's okay, big guy. You're not in trouble," I said to him as I got down on my belly to look at him head on. He stayed under the bed, not making a sound, just staring. I went to pet him, and he retracted slowly backwards, wedging himself further under the bed. I never laid harmful hands on him before. Why would he retract like that? This honestly broke my heart. "Okay, I'll just go clean up and give you some space then," I said. I cleaned up the mess, but the smell never went away. Midas eventually came out, and things were okay for the most part. He didn't eat his normal dinner, and he didn't even beg for a bite of mine. I think we were both stressed, so I called an early night. The next morning, his mood was cold and almost absent-minded. He didn't eat or go to the bathroom. He just laid there watching me. I went to pet him and try to cheer him up before I left for work, but it seemed like he couldn't care less. "You're starting to make me worry," I told him. "I'll be back soon." I patted his head and went to work. That day, it was hard to focus on anything other than Midas. I tried not to spiral into emotion. It was difficult. When I got back to the apartment, I stood outside the door with my hand on the knob. I was hoping for the best, for a warm, loving welcome, but fearing the cold, lonely distance. When I went in, Midas was lying on the couch. He raised his head to look at me, but there was no sign of excitement. I took my shoes off and put my stuff on the table. I walked over to him almost in a defeated march. In a lazy movement, he just slid himself off the couch and walked about 3 feet before lying down on the floor. There was a wet puddle on the couch cushion. Midas was sick for sure. I did my best to clean the stain and then sat there just talking to him from afar. I didn't want to smother him if he wasn't feeling well, and he still seemed apathetic. He sat there and watched me as I talked. I stayed up late, just recollecting memories together and telling him stories of my father. He never gave me his normal loving, happy to be alive kind of attention, but I could feel that he enjoyed not being alone. The next morning, I called off work and called the vet. I talked to the receptionist, who told me their earliest appointment was first thing tomorrow morning. I was reluctant, but I had no other choice. If I wanted someone to see him today, it would involve a 3-hour car ride to the animal emergency hospital and an enormous bill. It was a tough decision, but I couldn't afford to take him there. He seemed off and unwell, but it was just one more day. Just one day. The hardest day of my life. Midas still wouldn't eat anything I offered him. He almost seemed to get sicker at the sight of food. He had a rotten smell to him today. I lit some scented candles to help, but it all mixed into a foul odor of decomposing fruit. I did my very best to hold it together, and more importantly, not to blame myself and feel guilty. I did what I could to occupy my mind, doing little chores around the apartment, but I always kept an eye on Midas. Everything was slow and bleak in this new home of gloom. Minutes passed, then hours. That's when I heard a drip, followed by another and another. Not a stream or a trickle, but something leaking. I started my search at the sink. Nothing. Then I remembered the other day and scanned every inch of the ceiling. Still nothing. The dripping continued. I finally found the source. It was Midas. He just stood there with drip after drop coming from under him, while a puddle started to form. I went and grabbed a towel. He kept dripping. "You poor guy. It's okay," I said with a heart full of dread. I wrapped him up in a towel and helped him lie down. I thought he was having bladder problems. I went to get another towel to clean up, and on closer inspection, the puddle wasn't like urine. It was slimy and had a thickness like bile. It smelled both sweet and putrid. I did my best to clean it up without vomiting. I gagged and struggled to keep it down. I forced back down the unwanted substance in my throat. That's when I noticed Midas, inches away from me with excitement in his eyes. On my hands and knees, next to him, I felt almost like prey. I was scared of him. My body and mind locked up. I almost forgot how to breathe. He licked and slapped his jowls in anticipation. So close to me, it was deafening. The thunderous, wet hunger of him made my heart race until it hurt. I could see the shimmer of the same, bile slowly dangle from his mouth. My sickness was no longer from disgust, but overwhelming fear. We both stayed petrified in a state of hunger and terror, both waiting for the other to move. After a time that was too uncomfortably long, Midas just walked away. Feral starvation left his face, and he laid back down in the same spot as before. I wasn't as quick to return my composure. I slowly got back onto my feet, and I would never meet him on that level again. I went from fearing for him to fearing him. What the hell was happening? After a few hours of distance, I found myself on the couch once again. The apartment was quiet. No music, no talking, not even the sounds of the building falling apart. Then came a whine, a faint, tender whine. Midas was at my feet, looking up at me. My heart sank. His eyes were glossy, and his expression was somber. He seemed to know something I didn't. He seemed like he was saying goodbye. "You're going to be all right, Midas. Just a couple of hours and they'll fix you right up," I said in a broken tone, holding back a cracking dam of emotions. I leaned in a pet and hugged him. As soon as my hands felt under his golden, soft fur, I could feel his sickness. His skin felt hot and uncomfortably soft like wet clay. As I applied any amount of pressure, I could feel a mass of movement like a sack full of worms. My hands retracted, and the dam broke. I shot up onto my feet, my face covered with rivers of emotion running down. "We're taking you to the hospital now. Everything will be all right," I mumbled to Midas through the tears. I knew things were not going to be okay. I fumbled to the kitchen with what balance I could command. I frantically searched for my keys. I struggled to get my shoes on, like I didn't know how to wear them. I grabbed his leash from the wall hanger and had my hand on the doorknob. "Come on, bud. Let's go, we got to go," I cried. I looked back at Midas, just standing there in the middle of the apartment. He didn't budge. "Midas, please," I cried louder. I let go of the knob and took a few steps toward him. "Please, Midas. God, don't do this, please," I sobbed. Midas just stared at me with those faded brown eyes and gave out the softest whimper. In that moment, the bottom half of him spilled open like a soaking wet trash bag in the summer heat. What was Midas had collapsed into a steaming pile of flesh and maggots on the floor. A wave of putrid odor filled the air, accompanied by a storm of buzzing insects. Under what was left of his golden fleece rose a black and green iridescent cloud of flies that quickly swarmed every inch of the apartment. I didn't have time to process anything before being quickly attacked by the swarm. They covered me as I screamed and swatted. I flailed as I turned around, searching for the door that was only a few feet away. The flies were so abundantly thick, I couldn't see anything. They crawled all over me, into my mouth, my ears, my nostrils, and under my eyelids. I finally made my way out of the apartment into the hallway. I closed the door with a slam behind me. I flailed and spat as much as I could. After moments of assaulting myself, the flies were gone. The buzzing stopped. I stood still for a moment before collapsing to the floor and into an all-out wailing cry. The hallway was filled with the echoing howls of my painful cries. I was all alone out there. I didn't have much time to break down until the overwhelming thoughts of Midas filled my head. I had left him there. I abandoned him. None of this could be real. I got up on my trembling legs and opened my apartment door. The storm cloud of flies was gone. However, there were dead flies sprinkled throughout the apartment and small piles near the air vents and windows. I cautiously closed the door behind me. I was hoping that all of it was me going through a mental break or it was a nightmare. But reality in the form of a rotting pile of meat quickly proved me wrong. The odor was so strong and foul. I tried covering my face with my hands as I dropped to my knees beside the mound. My stomach stabbed in pain, and the room began to spin. I choked as I vomited through my hands. It started to spill out between my fingers, and eventually I stopped resisting and moved my hands away so the rest of me could spill out. It was dark, oily, and thick. As the contents pooled onto the floor, I noticed movement. There were several flies in my vomit, still wiggling and buzzing. Out of sheer disbelief and disconnection, I watched them. After my contents were purged from me, I began to feel hungry. Not a normal hunger, a starving hunger. I was ravenous. I didn't even notice my hands scooping up and pouring my stomach contents back into my mouth until it was too late. The acidic burn and slime quickly got my attention to come back. It was agonizing, but before I could process what I was doing, it was already sliding down my throat. I tried to stop. Another handful. I felt tears roll down my face and bob between my teeth. Another mouthful. My body wouldn't stop. It was like I was on autopilot. There was nothing I could do to control myself. I couldn't even feel my hands, even as they shoveled sickness back into me. They felt numb. The only thing I could feel was my face and my tongue fighting the nauseous chowder of pre-rendered meats and vegetables in a barely recognizable texture. The taste of battery acid and greasy pork mixed into a vile flavor that was the slurry I choked down. As the pool disappeared with one final retching gulp, I thought it was over, but my possession had only begun the torment. My body was like an animal next to the rotten mound of my friend. I screamed and cried out within my head. The only sound to leave me was a weak, unintelligible, wet gurgle. The first mouthful was just the beginning to a grueling hour-long feast. Each clump was a thick paste, marbled with cartilage. Clumps of hair scratched my throat and got caught between my teeth. The taste was that of fermented fruits and sour, curdled milk. All I could do was endure hell. At the end, I found myself chewing on bones with chipped and broken teeth. I could taste a river of my own blood, but I felt no pain. By the end of the consumption, I didn't feel much at all. My body was relinquished from its foreign control. I slowly got myself up. The only thing that was left of my friend, Midas, was some bones sucked clean and what paste of him that was still in my beard. I walked slowly to the bathroom and stared into the mirror. I didn't wash or clean myself. I found no purpose in doing so. I knew what had happened was wrong and the worst thing to ever happen to me, but I lacked concern. I had just eaten my doll, my best friend, but I wasn't sad. My mind felt hazy and my emotions felt sedated. I knew how I should feel, but I couldn't feel them. I knew I needed to go get help, even if they thought I was insane. But somehow my internal instincts must have been rewritten. All I wanted to do was stay home and let nothing happen. My thoughts were still my own, but those thoughts are nothing but a skeleton without feeling or control. I went to bed that night and slept without dreams. I awoke the next morning, starving again. I ransacked my apartment, looking for a meal. Everything fresh disgusted me, and I found myself eating forgotten, moldy leftovers. It didn't bother me. I was used to it. It was just an action that I needed to do, nothing more. I could feel as muscles and organs were devoured and replaced with wiggling, crawling life. My sense of self-preservation had been coded into something new. This felt like it was in my instincts to host and nurture. Just like birds flying south for the winter or salmon swimming to spawn, this was my nature. I am torn between this and my memories. Nature will win, but I will remember what it robbed me. I wish to feel sorrow. I want to cry again. All of that is a ghost now. Trying to recall sadness and joy is like trying to remember how something tastes. Familiar, but ever distant. Everything has been taken from me, but I am devoid of any emotion. My body is full now, not of myself, but of something else. They have become me and I them. My skin is soft to the touch like a rotten peach. I must not push too hard or I will puncture myself, and they may die. I've been in this state for 2 days now. Feeding, mothering, remembering. They have given me this apathetic bliss, but I know that it is hell. Soon they will be free, and so will I. I don't have much time left in me. I have started to drip.